Hello everyone, very good morning and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to another session on internal security. Before we begin, we have an important announcement. Next Monday, we won't be having any classes because of Christmas. So please note on Monday, 25th December, we won't be having the classes. It will be on Tuesday. So let's begin our discussion by starting with insurgency in Nagaland. Yesterday, if you remember, we had started with Northeast insurgency. We had discussed the general factors in Northeast India which has contributed to so many insurgent movements. We understood the geographical factors, the social and economic factors that have all played a role in leading to so many insurgent movements in Northeast India. So today, we will have a more detailed, specific discussion. We'll take up the most affected states. We will discuss the most prominent insurgent movements that have posed the biggest security threat to India. Let's start with the oldest insurgency faced by India. This is the Naga insurgency. The Naga insurgency is the oldest insurgency in the country. It broke out in 1947, right before India's independence. Naga groups had declared an insurgent war against the Indian state. Since then, Naga insurgency has been going on and it lasts even today. Even today, we haven't completely brought Naga insurgency to an end. Even though the violence has gone down in the last few decades, Naga insurgency is still very active and we do consider this as a major threat. So let's understand the history, the background. This is very, very important. We need to examine the specific causes related to Nagas which contributed to the insurgent movement. We should understand how the movement started, how it spread, what degree of threat it posed to India, and what is the current status. So this history, this story goes back to colonial times, as you can imagine. The origin lies in the colonial days. See, the Nagas are an ethnic group, a major ethnic group of Northeast India. Nagas can be found across several states. They are not just found in Nagaland. The Naga ethnic group or the community can be found in parts of Assam, in parts of Manipur and Mizoram, and they're also found in parts of Arunachal Pradesh. Is that clear? The Nagas are a major dominant ethnic group in the region, found not just in Nagaland, but also in some of the neighboring states, in parts of Assam, Arunachal, Manipur, Mizoram. In all these areas, Naga communities can be found. And interestingly, there are few Naga subgroups that are found in the neighboring country of Myanmar as well. Across the border in Myanmar, there are Naga subgroups that are connected to the Naga subgroups in India. Is that clear? This is very, very important. The term Naga is a very broad term. It refers to a large ethnic group. Within the Naga community, there are many sub-Naga clans. So some are found in Nagaland, and some are found in other neighboring states, and some are found across the border in Myanmar as well. So the Nagas are very proud of their identity, just like any community would be. They are very protective about their land, their resources, and their culture. So under the British rule, the British had extended their influence into Northeast India as well. Is that clear? And the British were smart enough to not completely occupy these regions and bring it completely under their control, because they knew that they will never be able to control indigenous communities and exert full control over these tribal communities. They knew that they will face a backlash, there will be rebellions. So instead of that, the British exercised their influence while giving a degree of autonomy to the region. In most parts of Northeast India, the British did not enforce their political administrative rule because for the British, what mattered was the economic interests. As long as they could access the resources of Northeast India, they didn't bother much about the political aspect, the administrative aspect, and the territory itself. So, in that regard, the British were very shrewd, right? They wanted to serve the colonial interests, which was economic exploitation. As long as they could access the forests and the resources of Northeast India, they would give autonomy to most of these ethnic groups, princely states that were present here, right? So this led many communities to believe that they were still independent. They still had their autonomy. The British cleverly imposed their laws, their policies, their economic exploitation easily went on. So they maintained a decent relationship with most of the tribal leaders, the ethnic communities present in Northeast India. But they did not enforce their political rule, their administrative rule. So by having this arrangement, the communities would feel that they are independent, they have autonomy. But in reality, the British were actually looting from them. They were exploiting the resources. Now, the British, they noticed that the Nagas had very good warfare skills. The Nagas, in particular, were known for their martial skills. Remember, we discussed this point yesterday that many ethnic groups and indigenous tribal communities, they are naturally good fighters. They would have ingrained martial skills. They are good in warfare and especially in jungle warfare. This is something that naturally comes to several tribal communities and ethnic groups. And Nagas in particular are renowned for their warfighting skills, their martial skills. So the British took note of this during the First World War. When the First World War was going on, the British noted the martial skills of the Nagas and they realized that they could use them in the conflict. So they recruited a few Nagas. They trained a few Naga commandos and used them as part of the British Indian Army. I hope you know that India has made an immense contribution to both the world wars. Unfortunately, we don't read much about it in our school days, in our history textbooks. But please note that India has made a tremendous contribution to World War I and as well as World War II. India has been the biggest contributor, one of the biggest contributor of men, material, and resources. In a way, India not just funded the war, Indian resources were diverted towards the war, from food grains to clothes, etc. And especially Indian soldiers. Indian soldiers were transported with the British to various conflict areas during First World War and Second World War. And our soldiers have fought around the world, from West Asia to Africa to Europe to Southeast Asia. In all these parts of the world, Indian soldiers made an enormous contribution to the British and Allied efforts during the two world wars. So when the First World War was going on, the British had already trained few Naga soldiers, turned them into Naga commandos, and they had sent them abroad. So these Naga soldiers who fought abroad, right, now they were politically aware. They understood the concept of a nation state. They understood geopolitics. They basically gained wartime knowledge by fighting in the battlefields around the world. Because previously they weren't exposed to the outside world. They were largely restricted to the Naga inhabited areas. For the first time, a large number of members of this group, they ventured out of Naga areas and they fought around the world. So when they came back in 1918, came back to India, they had enormous wartime knowledge and political knowledge. And some of these Naga soldiers, they organized themselves into a club called the Naga Club. These Naga commandos who specialized in jungle warfare, who had fought for the British, right? They formed this political group, this association called the Naga Club. So Naga Club became the representative of the Naga community. The Naga Club appointed itself as the political representative of the Nagas. So these soldiers who had fought, now they came back with tremendous political and wartime knowledge, and they realized that there was a need for the community to politically organize in order to protect their community rights. Because, see, in Europe, they saw how nation states are organized on the lines of ethnicity, on the lines of race. Basically, people of one kind come together to form a country. People who speak one language form a nation. People of one ethnicity form a country. People of one religion form a country. So, when they saw the nationalism in Europe, when they understood the concept of nation state, they realized that why shouldn't they have their own country? A country for Nagas. Since Nagas are such a large ethnic group spread across Northeast India and then Burma, right? Myanmar was Burma back then. So if such a large group, right, exists, why should they be part of another country? Why don't they fight for their own rights? Why don't they have their own land, their own nation state? So these thoughts started coming up, and it was promoted by the members of the Naga Club, the former soldiers who had fought, who were part of Naga Club. They started voicing these opinions. They started politically mobilizing the Naga community to fight for their distinct political ethnic identity. Understood? So the social political circumstances played a big role. So now the Nagas who had contributed to the British efforts, they expected a favor from the British in return. Now that they had fought for the British, they expected the British to fulfill these political demands. That if India ever becomes independent, if you ever give independence to India, please ensure that you don't include Naga areas as part of India. Because we have nothing in common with India. We are culturally distinct. Historically, we have been disconnected from rest of India. We are a large ethnic group. So we deserve to have our own country. Right? We deserve to have our own nation. And we wouldn't like to be part of any future independent nation that is going to be formed. This was the political demand raised by the Naga Club. With the backing of the Naga community, which was now being politically organized, the members of Naga Club raised this demand. They started expressing this demand for a nation, for an independent nation by 1920s itself. Is that clear? So this is where the struggle begins. So now the members of Naga Club, they were not only politically aware, they had war fighting skills. They had mobilized the community. They had built the concept of their ethnic identity, based on which they could seek independence to form their own nation. And they started presenting these demands officially to the British. When the Simon Commission visited India in late 1920s, in 1929, members of Naga Club, they even submitted an official memorandum. They submitted an official document highlighting the rights of the Nagas and their demand for independence. Their demand was very simple. That, see, we don't have anything in common with rest of India. We are not culturally connected to them. Historically, we don't have much connection. We are a distinct group of people. This is our land. This is our forests. So ensure that when you give independence to India, Naga areas are not included. Naga areas are independent and we should form a separate country. And the British, since they needed the Naga soldiers, they needed their support and assistance, they would make these vague promises, vague commitments that yes, in the future we will see. We might give you independence. They would encourage those ethnic nationalist tendencies, the ethno-nationalist tendencies. Now, I hope you know why the Simon Commission visited India. Can anyone tell me why was the Simon Commission visiting India? What was its purpose? You would have studied in polity or even in modern history. What was the primary purpose of Simon Commission? Why was it set up? Very good. Srihari, Shovik, Nirbhay, Shreyank, Yashpal Sin, Sham, all of them have given the right answer. Very good. In 1919, a major constitutional change had been introduced. The Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. The Government of India Act 1919 had been brought out. So under the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, it had been provided that 10 years after its implementation, there will be a review commission, a commission to review the functioning of Government of India Act 1919. So in 1929, 10 years after Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, Simon Commission was appointed to visit India, to meet with all the sections of the Indian society, to meet with all the parties and organizations and communities and generate their opinion. So the Simon Commission would meet with various political parties, organizations, princely states as well, and representatives of various communities. So Nagas also got their chance. The members of Naga Club met the Simon Commission, even though the Congress had boycotted Simon Commission. Right? You would have heard about Simon Go Back movement, where our freedom fighters were protesting against the Simon Commission. But members of Naga Club, they sought a representation with the Simon Commission. They met the Simon Commission as well and submitted an official memorandum asking the British to give recognition to their national identity. The demand was, if India is ever given independence, please ensure Naga areas are not included. And the British even made some vague promises. If not for a guaranteed promise, if not through a legal document, at least verbally, they made a lot of commitments and promises and kept encouraging the ethno-nationalist tendencies. Then came the Second World War. The Second World War broke out. Now again, the British needed the help of the Nagas, as British Indian Army was playing a critical role in backing the Allied powers. The British again drew support from Nagas to use them in guerrilla warfare. They were specialists in guerrilla warfare. Even today, the Indian Army specially focuses on Northeast India while recruiting soldiers, especially communities like Naga, right? Several Naga soldiers, they serve the Indian Army. They are part of the Indian Army, right? Because they're known for their guerrilla warfare skills, their war fighting skills. So the British, who had recognized this talent, they again needed the assistance of Naga commandos in guerrilla warfare during the Second World War. So they again took their help and again made promises, vague promises that, see, we will fulfill your political demand. If tomorrow independence comes to India, we'll ensure that you will get independence. You'll be separate from India. So by making such commitments, they kept using Naga soldiers for their war efforts. And after the Second World War, as the Second World War came to an end, the Naga Club transformed into the NNC, the Naga National Council. In 1946, after the World War ended, the Naga Club, which was there, now became a more formal political organization called the NNC, the Naga National Council. Now, this name is very important. The term national, it clearly shows that Nagas, they were fighting for nationalist purposes. They wanted a separate nation for the community. See, at this point, there was nothing wrong with this, because across the country, there were many communities, many princely states, which were all seeking independence. Even though our freedom struggle was largely united to form a single Indian Union, there were many forces that were trying to pull apart. And it's understandable as well. As smaller groups, they would feel threatened to be part of a larger country, a diverse country, right? They had no guarantee that their rights will be protected, that they'll get equal treatment. So prior to 1947, these tendencies are understandable. But the continuation of this and taking up violence post-independence, that is inexcusable, right? As India gained independence eventually, and the constitution was adopted, right? We have studied in previous classes how India guaranteed equal rights and equal treatment to everyone. the diverse nature of India was reflected in the constitution. By keeping in mind the diverse interests of various communities, our constitution makers, our founding fathers, they had the far-sightedness to ensure that the country remains united by promising equal treatment, no discrimination, and equal rights to everyone. So when these commitments were made through the constitution, that should have ended these tendencies, these nationalist, separatist tendencies. But the continuation of this, even after independence, even after the adoption of the constitution, is what creates the problem. That becomes a threat to the very integrity of the nation, the sovereignty of the nation. So the NNC, which was now a very formidable political organization, reiterated the demand for full independence from India. Because by 1946, it was evident that India is about to become independent. Our freedom struggle had gained momentum. The British were losing their control over their colonies. In fact, the World War itself had weakened Britain, right? Economically, Britain was drained. European countries were struggling, suffering, right? Their infrastructure had been destroyed. They had a refugee crisis going on. Their economies had crashed because of the World War. So Britain was a power on the decline. The US had emerged as the global power by 1945-46. So it was only a matter of time that India was going to get independence. So as we headed towards independence, the Nagas became even more serious about their freedom struggle. They reiterated their demand for full independence from India. They wouldn't settle for anything less. No compromise. Their only demand was, we want full independence. So this demand was obviously unacceptable to the Indian leaders. The Indian National Congress rejected this demand outright because this would set a wrong precedent. We already had Pakistan, which was getting formed on religious lines, right? Pakistan was already getting formed on religious lines. This itself had been resisted by our freedom fighters. But eventually, creation of Pakistan had to be accepted because there was no other practical choice. There were large-scale communal riots across India, Hindu-Muslim riots. So allowing Pakistan to part to undergo a partition on religious lines was the only other option left. So this had already divided the country, broken the country. Now, if we allow another region to break away and form a separate country on ethnic lines, then tomorrow every other community will have the same demand. There were princely states which were hesitant to join India. Some wanted to join Pakistan. Now, in such a scenario, how will you build a strong union? How will you build a strong nation? This was the concern of the Indian leaders, the leaders of the Indian National Congress. From Nehru to Sardar Patel, even Mahatma Gandhi at that point, they were firmly opposed to any further breakup of the Indian subcontinent. Right? So India rejected the idea that Nagas should have their own country. The Indian leaders ensured that the British would not honor the commitment they had made to the Nagas. The demand of the Indian leaders was no region will be granted independence. It's not possible. Right? Even others, even princely states later will try to bring them under the Indian Union because it was necessary to build a strong union. So the demand of the NNC was outright rejected by the Indian National Congress, by the Indian leaders. So now what the British did was they struck a compromise because both sides were on the extreme ends. NNC is asking for independence, full independence from India. Indian leaders are against it, saying we will merge Naga areas with India. So in between, the British, they struck a deal. They struck a compromise. This is called the Akbar-Haidari Agreement, the 9-point agreement. Please make a note of this. Akbar Haidari was the governor of Assam, the province of Assam. And interestingly, he is the grandfather of Aditi Rao Haidari, the Bollywood actress. So Akbar Rao Haidari was the governor of Assam, the representative of the British representative at that point. He was the British representative in the Northeast region. So he would negotiate a deal with some of the moderate leaders of NNC. See, within NNC, there were some moderate leaders as well. There were some extremist leaders as well. So the British representative, Akbar Hydari, Sir Akbar Hydari, would approach the moderate leaders, would negotiate with NNC, and finally a deal was struck in 1947. This is the Akbar Hydari Agreement, the 9-point agreement. Now look at the date. When was it signed? June 1947. Just a couple of months before India's independence. And what was the deal? The deal was there will be no independence to Naga areas. It's not possible. Independence is out of the question. Complete sovereignty is out of the question. India has rejected this. Indian leaders have rejected it. It's not possible. But however, Naga rights will be taken care of. Naga rights will be protected. How? They will be given autonomy within the ambit of the Indian Constitution. When India will eventually draft and adopt its constitution, there will be a special provision, a special status to Naga areas through which Nagas will enjoy their executive, legislative, even taxation and judicial powers. Is that clear? So autonomy will be provided. It will be inbuilt into the Indian Constitution. In a way similar to the kind of special status given to Jammu and Kashmir, which joined India under very difficult circumstances. So this commitment was made and this was acceptable to India. Giving autonomy was never the problem for us. In fact, this has been a primary tool, a constitutional tool that we have used to address several demands in Northeast India and to put down several insurgencies in Northeast India. This is the flexibility of the Indian Constitution, the beauty of the Indian Constitution. Our Constitution is not very rigid. It has many flexible aspects. Because of this flexibility, we can grant autonomy to certain areas in certain subjects while retaining sovereignty over those areas. With regard to subjects like defense, communication, external affairs, those subjects will belong to the government of India, to the parliament. We will have full jurisdiction, full sovereignty. But administration at the local level, like education, healthcare, roads, land, local taxation, and even executive, administrative, and judicial powers at the local level, they can all be devolved to the local administrative councils. There's no problem with that. Instead of rejecting such demands and building up pressure, resentment, and leading to extremism, this is always a better option. So Indian leaders agreed to grant constitutional autonomy, that Nagas will get special rights. There will be a special provision in the constitution guaranteeing autonomy to the Naga areas. This seemed like a fair deal, fair for everyone, fair to India, fair to the Naga people as well, right? So Naga areas will merge with India. It will very much be part of Indian Union, but Naga areas will get some autonomy, constitutional autonomy. They'll get some executive, legislative, financial, and judicial powers. This will help them to look after their own governance. This will help them to protect their land, their resources, their culture. It will also help them to block any laws passed by the state or the center which might affect the community. So such powers were guaranteed. But however, not everyone agreed to the deal. It was only the moderate leaders who agreed to the Akbar Hydari Agreement. It was only the moderates who signed the agreement. Is that clear? So basically, this was seen as a compromise by the extremists. The extremists in the NNC, they saw this as a compromise and they rejected the compromise. So please try and understand this and make a note of this. As it is India's oldest insurgency, it's very, very important to understand the origin, the root cause. So moderate leaders of NNC, they realized that they couldn't fight India. India would any day be a larger country after independence. There's no point in going to war or waging a conflict. So it's better to accept India's sovereignty. Even the community will benefit by being part of a large country, meaning they'll have more resources, right? And in return, if they get autonomy to look after their own affairs, that is the best deal, the best compromise. So the moderate elements, they accepted it, they signed the agreement. But the extremists of NNC, they rejected it. They didn't want anything other than independence. They wouldn't settle for any autonomy, any kind of compromise. So right before India's independence, just a day before India could officially become independent, these extremist factions of NNC, they declared Naga independence. They rejected the agreement and declared that Naga areas are independent. It's a separate country from India. This marked the beginning of the insurgent war. This was a declaration of war against the Indian state, which was yet to be formed. Right? India gained independence on 15th August. Right before that, the NNC declared independence from India, thus beginning the insurgent war against the country. So from here onwards, Naga insurgents who already had war fighting skills, they had accumulated arms and weapons as well. So once the war was declared, they would lead this insurgency against the Indian state. They would start targeting Indian forces, the Indian state in northeast India, in the Naga inhabited areas. And also please remember, the Naga areas did not get statehood. There was no separate state for Nagas. Nagaland did not exist. Nagaland was created much later. Most of the Naga areas were divided between Assam and the Northeast Frontier Agency that existed. So this was how the Naga insurgency broke out, starting from 1947. Is that clear? So Nagaland as a separate state was not set up. It was not created. Only autonomy had been promised. It was rejected by the extremists. They declared the start of their insurgency. But India merged all these areas into the Indian Union. It became very much part of India's sovereignty. So from here onwards, Naga insurgency escalated throughout 1950s, 60s, 70s. For almost 3 decades, this became India's biggest security nightmare in the northeast of India. So as the insurgency increased, as the violence went up, the Assam Rifles, which was stationed in the region, was given the responsibility to counter the insurgency along with the Indian Army. The Indian Army and Assam Rifles were given the lead role to tackle Naga insurgency beginning from 1950s itself. This was becoming a national security threat. It was threatening the integrity of the nation. So to tackle the movement, a very controversial law, a British law, was brought back and reintroduced, which is nothing but your AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It was brought back in 1958. This is another important point. There might be a prelims question. Where was AFSPA first imposed in independent India? It is to tackle Naga insurgency in northeast India, in then Assam. It was part of Assam. So it was in Assam where AFSPA was brought in almost permanently. We had used AFSPA briefly during partition, but that was limited to some areas where communal violence was very high. See, AFSPA is a colonial law, a British era law that had been brought out in 1942 to counter the Quit India movement, to target the Quit India movement and to detain our freedom fighters. AFSPA had been introduced, which gave special powers to the British police. So post-independence, we had ensured that we don't carry forward the British legacy. It was a law used to target our freedom struggle, our freedom fighters. So this would serve no good to India. So we had not carried forward this law. It was used briefly again only during partition when India-Pakistan broke apart because large-scale communal violence had gripped the country. To tackle the communal violence and to tackle the religious mobs, right? AFSPA was used briefly in some parts of the country. So for the first time, it was implemented formally in a proper manner in Assam to tackle Naga insurgency in 1958. So this would give special powers to the security forces, the army and the Assam Rifles, right? They would engage in counter-insurgency operations to target the Naga insurgents, to target the NNC. Now, these Naga insurgents, they easily took shelter in Myanmar and also in East Pakistan. As Indian forces started hunting the rebels, they came under pressure. Right, by 1950s, 1960s, our counterinsurgency operations had begun. With special powers under AFSPA, they were conducting effective security operations targeting the outfit. So as they could no longer remain in India, the Naga rebels, they shifted out. They moved out across the border and they found a safe haven, a base in Myanmar and also in East Pakistan. Now, how come they could shift so easily? How come they got that support? It's because in Myanmar, as I told you, there are Naga subgroups present. They are connected. They have a familial cultural connection. So the Nagas in Myanmar welcomed the Indian rebels, the Indian Naga rebels, and sheltered them and gave a safe sanctuary to them. In East Pakistan, it was the Pakistani state which wanted to create problems for India. Pakistan saw this as an opportunity. It saw this as an opportunity to weaken India in the northeast by supporting these rebel groups. So in East Pakistan, they were sheltered by the Pakistani state itself, given sanctuaries, given funds and weapons as well to wage this war against India. So because of this support that came from outside in Myanmar and East Pakistan, the movement became a notorious movement and a dangerous threat to India. By 1960s, the movement had really scaled up. All right. So India made one more attempt to negotiate with Nagas and to ensure that we bring them back into the mainstream. So when India was reorganized, by 1956, we had started the reorganization process. Different states were being carved out on linguistic lines. So as a continuation of the reorganization process, India made a concession to respect Naga identity and to ensure that they feel belonged to the Indian state. Naga areas were separated from Assam and Naga land was established. Naga land was created as a state. It was granted statehood. And a peace mission was also set up by the government of India to begin talks, to work out a negotiated settlement. Now, this helps you understand the approach of India in tackling insurgency. Basically, whatever we have discussed right now gives you the whole idea about what is our approach to tackle Northeast insurgency. See, first, we will tackle the security problem through a security approach. We will use our armed forces, our security forces. We will even give them special powers. Even though the law is controversial, we will give special powers and we will conduct effective counter-insurgency operations. We will target the violent insurgents. At the same time, we are ready for political concessions. We are ready for a dialogue. We are ready to negotiate a settlement and try and meet the rights, the concerns and demands of the insurgents. This has been India's well-established process to deal with Northeast insurgency. Because some communities, they do have a genuine root cause. In the case of Nagas, yes, prior to independence, their demands are understandable. Right? The promises made are understandable. So today as well, India is ready to grant some autonomy, grant some more flexibility, but not outright independence. So India has shown that flexibility to tackle insurgencies, to address the political demands. Along with tackling the extremists through a security approach, we are always open for talks and dialogue, to sign a peace accord, to provide an arrangement where these regions can function within Indian sovereignty but with autonomy. So a dialogue process began. We started talking to Naga rebels, and we even granted statehood to respect the Naga identity. This was a mistake which was done. Nagaland should have been carved out as a separate state long ago, because including it as part of Assam led the Nagas to feel inferior to the Assamese. I told you yesterday, Assamese are the most dominant group in Northeast India. Many other ethnic groups, tribes, they have an issue with the Assamese. So by including Naga areas as part of Assam, it was kind of a disrespect to the whole community. Statehood should have been granted earlier, but the mistake was rectified by carving out Naga land and by granting statehood, and a peace process began as well. All right? But despite the peace process, despite all the attempts made by India, the extremist leaders, they did not budge. They wouldn't settle for such arrangements. They weren't happy with autonomy, statehood. They wanted outright independence, nothing less than that. Now that they had support from Pakistan and Myanmar, they knew they had bases across the border. They could arrange funds, they could arrange weapons. They refused to end their war. They refused to surrender. So basically, this war continued throughout 1970s. In 1971, the biggest blow to Naga insurgency happened in East Pakistan. Because by 1971, East Pakistan did not exist anymore. India had broken Pakistan into two parts. Bangladesh had been liberated, and obviously Bangladesh would be very close to India. The initial Bangladeshi government under Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, under Awami League, would be a pro-India government, very friendly towards India and ever grateful for India's efforts in liberating Bangladesh. Right? So as Bangladesh was liberated from Pakistan, the Naga rebels lost their bases. They lost the support base that existed in East Pakistan. So with this, the movement started weakening. The NNC could no longer continue the fight as it wanted. There was constant pressure on the insurgents from Indian forces on one hand, and on the other hand, we were offering a peace deal. So some of the rational, moderate leaders, they agreed for talks. They agreed to end this violence, end the war through a negotiated settlement. So they participated in the peace process, which we had started in 1965. The talks went on, and finally, a deal was struck. The Shillong Accord of 1975 was finalized. It was between Government of India, the Government of Nagaland, and the Naga rebels from NNC. All right, the terms were very similar to 9-point agreement. Basically, we will give you constitutional autonomy. See, we've already created a separate state. Apart from that, we will give you constitutional autonomy. Special provisions will be added. You'll be able to look after your own governance, your own administration will not interfere, but we will exercise sovereignty. On some subjects, we will have full control, and the rest of it is under you. So the same deal was brought back. Now it was the Shillong Accord, because negotiations happened at Shillong in Meghalaya. Now this deal was supposed to be implemented. But before its implementation, the extremists in the NNC again created the same old problem. There were three extremist leaders who wouldn't accept anything less than independence. Some of the more rational leaders, they realized they couldn't fight India. They had already fought for 2 decades. They had lost support in East Pakistan. They knew that there was no point in leading this war. It would only lead to more violence and more instability. So they were ready to accept the terms. The Shillong Accord was final. But 3 leaders in particular, Isaac, Muiva, and Kaplang, these Naga extremists, these 3 Naga extremists, they refused to accept anything less than independence. They were hell bent on fighting for independence. Because by now, this was not even about nationalistic identity or ethnic identity. Basically, these guys, in the name of ethno nationalism, in the name of their ethnic community, in the name of defending their community, they were basically protecting their own political, economic interests. Remember what did I tell you from the first class? Wars, conflicts is always about money, business. These three terrorists, Isaac, Muiwa, Kaplan, they are terrorists according to India. India has classified them as terrorists because they would form a terrorist outfit later. They just wanted to continue their organized crime, which had become their biggest business. In the name of insurgency, in the name of fighting for their community on ethno-nationalistic lines, they were deceiving their own people because through their armed movement, they were basically carrying out extortion. They were basically smuggling drugs, arms, making a lot of money by getting involved in criminal activities. Why would they want to give up that political and economic power? Right? So motivated by this, they rejected the Shillong Accord. They broke apart from NNC. The NNC broke apart. And these three terrorists established one of India's most dangerous terrorist organization, the NSCN. This is how NSCN was formed in 1980. They shifted base to Myanmar. Now that they didn't have support in Bangladesh, they shifted base to Myanmar. And in Myanmar, the NSCN was formed by Isaac, Muiwa, and Kaplan. These are the names of the three Naga terrorists who formed the NSCN. The NSCN has been one of the most dangerous terrorist organizations that has posed one of the biggest threats to India in the Northeast region. Understood? So as the Naga movement was splitting, there were some moderate political elements, some rebels who were ready to surrender and end the war. They were ready to accept the terms India was giving. They were ready to accept autonomy. But these extremists who refused to accept it, they would escalate the movement, continue this war against India. And why were they doing this? Why were they fighting? It was not even about their community, their ethnic identity. They had gone beyond that. They had developed selfish interests, narrow interests. They realized that they will be prominent and dominant only if they continue their armed movement. And they can use the armed movement to threaten everyone in the region, to dominate over others, and use that to extort money from businesses, get involved in land deals, collect local taxes, illegal taxes from people. That is extortion. Get involved in criminal activities like drug smuggling, drug trafficking, raise funds. So this was the motivation of the Naga terrorists led by Isaac, Muiwa, and Kaplan. They formed NSCN, the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, and established base in Myanmar in 1980. So from here onwards, we saw further escalation of violence as a result of Naga insurgency. India was bringing it down because of our security operations, because of our negotiations, because of the peace accord we had signed, the Shillong Accord. Violence was actually declining. We were about to end the insurgency. So at this critical point, these extremists broke apart and continued their war by forming a new dangerous outfit. So from here onwards, the violence escalated. So from Myanmar, NSCN would mount attacks against India. By this point, by 1970s, these Naga extremists had built contacts with China. After 1962 war, the border war between India and China, China was looking for opportunities to destabilize India, to target India. It had launched its covert proxy war from 1960s, 1970s itself. So obviously, China had kept its eyes on Northeast India. It knew that there are multiple fault lines in the northeast which it could exploit. So Chinese intelligence agencies, they would support these northeast rebels via Myanmar. Chinese intelligence agencies would start supplying funds, weapons, and they would convince Myanmar's military to not target them. As China has a lot of control over Myanmar's military, which had formed a dictatorship by then, they would convince the military, the government of Myanmar, to not target the northeast rebels who had taken shelter in Myanmar. So Myanmar became a base for terrorism and insurgency against India, and China was playing a direct role in backing the movement. Not just NSCN, there were many other groups. We will discuss this one by one. There are many other rebel groups which have been sponsored by China, supported by China. This is China's covert proxy war against India to destabilize the Northeast and to create challenges for India in the Northeast. So 1980s was a difficult period for us. If you ask me, out of all the decades since independence, the most difficult decade for us in Northeast India was the 1980s. It was the most challenging because we had multiple insurgencies going on. Not just Naga insurgency. There was active insurgency in Manipur, in Mizoram. The Assamese insurgency had broken out. Insurgency broke out in Tripura, in parts of Meghalaya. So almost across the region, violent armed movements had broken out and the violence had escalated. This was the most difficult, challenging period for India. There was a credible threat to our integrity, to our sovereignty. There were foreign elements involved, like China, Pakistan to an extent. There was foreign support that existed, bases that existed in Bangladesh and in Myanmar. So this was a nightmare, a security nightmare for India. So NSCN eventually split up in 1988. 8 years later, differences came up between the leaders, between Isaac Muiwa and Kaplan. Their objectives, their goals were different. Their agendas were different. So within the group, there was a split, a factional split. So different factions came up. Now, this is another common feature that you find in Northeast insurgency. Many groups have split up like this. Many groups have split up because of ideological differences between the leaders. Now, what does this show? It shows that many of these extremist leaders are motivated by their own self-interests rather than the community interests. Even though they claim they are fighting for the community, that's not true. They're fighting for themselves. They know that as long as they hold weapons in their hand, they remain influential. They can threaten people. They can make money. They can run illegal businesses, right? And every now and then they can keep threatening India as well. So that is how these rebels have become. We will study NDFB, ULFA and others. Even there we have seen the same trend. So that is why these factions split up, because their economic interests will differ, their political goals will differ. So after some years, the leaders will have differences between them and they will split. The groups will split into different factions. So NSCN broke into IM faction and K faction. Isaac and Muiwa came together to form NSCN IM, NSCN Isaac Muiwa faction. Kaplang went separate. He formed Kaplang faction. They shifted bases as well. Isaac Muiwa shifted to Bangladesh because by 1980s, Bangladesh had become hostile to India. India's good friend Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated in 1974 by pro-Pakistan elements. The Awami League was thrown out of power and a pro-Pakistan dictatorship had come up. The Bangladeshi army had captured power by throwing out Awami League and killing the leaders. So Bangladesh had fully become pro-Pakistan and anti-India. So from 1970s itself, all the way till 1980s, 1990s, there was complete support coming from Bangladesh, and Pakistan's ISI was directly involved in creating the support network. The ISI had scaled its war against India. Remember, it had sworn to bleed India through 1,000 cuts. It was already delivering a cut in Punjab, then in Jammu and Kashmir. It was also delivering cuts in Northeast India. By using Bangladesh as a base, by taking the help of the Bangladeshi army, which was pro-Pakistan, it was backing NSCN IM faction, giving complete support to the Isaac Muiwa faction. So a sanctuary was created for the group in Bangladesh with easy supply of funds and weapons from where the group could target India. On the other hand, Kaplang faction remained in Myanmar. Even today, Kaplang faction operates from Myanmar and gets direct support from China. So this is what happened with the split. Is that clear? First, NSCN was formed in 1980 in Myanmar. Isaac Muiwa Kaplang, they were all together initially. Later, as differences came up between them, the group split. The Isaac Muiwa faction shifted to Bangladesh with Bangladeshi and Pakistani support. The Kaplang faction retained base in Myanmar with Chinese support and support from local Naga groups. So this is how the split happened. So this war continued for a few more years. Throughout 80s and early 90s, Naga insurgency continued. But from 1990s, India's approach became more aggressive. India became more proactive in tackling these threats. Right? We could no longer be complacent. We were crushing Khalistan movement on one side. Similarly, we had a need to crush these rebel movements as well. So from late 80s and early 90s, India stepped up its counterinsurgency operations. The government of India, the subsequent governments, they gave full backing to the Indian Army and Assam Rifles to unleash a major war targeting multiple Northeast insurgent groups. As the whole region was infested with insurgency, a full-out war, an all-out war was launched that lasted nearly a decade, from late 80s to early 90s. Multiple insurgent groups were targeted by the armed forces along with intelligence agencies, IB and RAW. Even the concerned state police, even they would play a big role. The concerned state police forces. So from Assam to Manipur to Tripura to Nagaland, across Northeast India, we scaled up the security operations in order to ensure that we weaken these outfits. And these operations gave success. They yielded results. By 1990s and early 2000, NSCN factions had been weakened by Indian operations. We had broken their financing network. Many of their cadres were neutralized. Many were arrested. So the groups were on the decline. So this forced them to sign a ceasefire agreement with the government of India. Ceasefire basically means we will stop the war temporarily. Right? The insurgents promise that will not carry out attacks. Government promises that will not carry out counterattacks. So we will cease the fire. We will stop the fire. So a ceasefire agreement was signed between India and NSCN IM and between India and NSCN Kaplang. Both factions, they signed a ceasefire in 97-2001 respectively. In between, there were other factions which kept forming. There is the Kole Kitovi group, which is also based out of Myanmar, formed recently in 2011. NSCN Kaplang itself has split into multiple factions today. Today, if you look at the Kaplang group, there are multiple factions. There are at least, I think, 4 to 5 different NSCN Kaplang factions, because each different leader, they have broken the group apart. So even though the group has weakened, it has gone down since 90s and early 2000, the insurgency remains active. Even after signing the ceasefire, these groups, they refused to surrender. India said, look, you have signed the ceasefire agreement. Now we are ready to talk. Now that you are stopping the violence, even we will not target you, but we are ready to negotiate. Come, let's sit, discuss, and work out a settlement, a political solution. We will give you more constitutional guarantees. We will give you more funds, promised more development. Right? India said we are ready for those talks. But despite this, these groups, they refused to surrender. They did not end their insurgency. There was no end to their violence. Is that clear? So what is their goal? What is the goal of these outfits? The stated goal of NSCN, right, any faction of NSCN, is to create a country called Greater Nagalim or Greater Nagaland. This is their stated objective. That's what they claim. They want to unite all Naga areas. They're not just asking independence for Nagaland. Don't be under the wrong assumption. They want to bring all Naga areas in India and Myanmar together to form a separate country. This has been their stated political demand. So it means they want to break Naga areas in Assam as well, in Manipur and Mizoram as well, in Arunachal Pradesh as well. And they want to break Naga areas in Myanmar, bring them all together and form the so-called Nagalim. Nagalim is basically Greater Nagaland. They want this to be a separate country. And let me tell you something very interesting, very ironic. They want this to be a Christian nation. Now, why am I mentioning this? How is it relevant? Why is this interesting? It is interesting because these groups are essentially left-wing extremist outfits. All the Northeast insurgents, they are examples of left-wing extremism. They're fighting for a political cause primarily. They want to liberate those areas. They are separatist groups, right? And we have studied in left-wing extremism, religion has no importance. Religion is a feature of right-wing extremism, right-wing fundamentalism. So what has religion got to do with them? Now, please look at the name of the group, National Socialist Council of Nagaland. The word socialist clearly shows their communist ideology, their communist inclination. Even if you look at the structure of the groups, the way they are organized, it's a clear communist structure, similar to China, Russia, etc. Most Northeast groups are like this. They are politically left-wing extremist groups. They are actually left-wing extremist communist organizations. But some of them have mixed religion with left-wing extremism. It's a very interesting combination. It's an interesting mixture of revolutionary socialism with a religious ideology. Because during British rule, Christian missionaries, they spread Christianity all across the region. In Mizoram, in Naga areas, and few other areas, Christianity swept over the region, right? So some of these insurgent groups, they have this stated claim that if they break away from India and form a separate country, they want to turn those countries into Christian nations. You will see the same with Mizo insurgency as well. We will study Mizo insurgency later. Even there you will see a similar demand that they want to break Mizo areas away, form a separate country, which would be a Christian country. That's an interesting combination, a mixture of left-wing extremism with some religious ideology. Usually it doesn't happen, right? Both are two different extremes, but there can be exceptions. This is one exception. The NSCN is an exception. It's a left-wing extremist movement motivated by communist socialist ideology. Their structure, their tactics, their principles, everything is left-wing extremism. But their demand for separate state is rooted slightly on religious grounds as well. Right? So they want to turn the so-called Nagalim, the Greater Nagaland that they refer to, they want to turn this into a Christian nation. So this is the agenda of NSCN. To break all Naga inhabited areas from Assam to Arunachal, Manipur, Mizoram, of course Nagaland, and Myanmar. Bring all of them together to form Nagalim, Greater Nagaland. So even after signing the ceasefire in 97 and 2001, these groups did not surrender. They continued from 2000 to 2010. They continued their insurgency. They continued their violence, and this was primarily motivated by their business interests in organized crime. They were motivated primarily by the political control that they were exercising. By using the armed groups, right, they could intimidate people, threaten businesses, collect illegal taxes, and they could even threaten other communities. Like, for example, Nagas, the NSCN, has threatened the Metis in Manipur. In the hill regions of Manipur, Nagas are also present. So these Nagas of Manipur get support from NSCN. And the Nagas threaten the Metis in the valley region of Manipur, which leads to ethnic clashes between the Nagas and the Metis. So like this, NSCN has become this notorious organization. It's not just an insurgent group. It has turned itself into a criminal organization, collecting illegal taxes, threatening businesses and people, stopping trucks and collecting haftas. It's become a mafia, right? So they refused to give up their war. They continued the conflict. And again, they were getting support in Bangladesh. Again, they had base in Myanmar. Especially until 2009, Bangladesh remained a concern for India. Please remember this point. Until 2009, Bangladesh was a major concern for us. From 1974 till 2009, Bangladesh has been a challenge, a major security challenge. During this period, Bangladesh was a safe haven for insurgents, multiple insurgent groups to hide. First under the military rule, then under the rule of the BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party. BNP is another right-wing party in Bangladesh. It's a pro-Pakistan party. It's an anti-India party. You might have read about it recently as well. Right now, Bangladeshi elections are coming up. Sheikh Hasina and her party, Awami League, they are contesting the elections, fighting elections. And the opposition, BNP, has boycotted the elections. They've said will not take part in the elections. That's the same party I'm referring to. So BNP had formed the government in early 90s. All right, Awami League also came to power only for 4-5 years, from 96 to 2001, but it wasn't enough. Back then, Sheikh Hasina was still not a very strong leader. Awami League was still finding its pace. So we couldn't get much help from Bangladesh even when Sheikh Hasina became the prime minister in the 90s. So throughout these 30, 40 years, Bangladesh was a big problem for India. Pakistan had embedded itself deeply into Bangladeshi society. The IS8 had created this safe haven in Bangladesh with the help of the BNP government and the military dictatorship that existed. So the breakthrough for India was 2009. 2009 was a crucial year because Awami League won a convincing election, bringing Sheikh Hasina as the leader with full majority and full control. This was the blessing for India. It was a boon for India. From a security nightmare, Bangladesh turned into our best friend. Under Sheikh Hasina and Awami League, a complete crackdown was initiated on these notorious insurgents who were hiding in Bangladesh. From Assamese insurgents like Ulfa, Bodos, Naga insurgents, and many others, they were all hiding in Bangladesh with support from Pakistan and Bangladesh. But in 2009, there was a turning point, a landmark event. When Awami League won the election, Sheikh Hasina re-emerged as a strong leader. And since then, she hasn't lost a single election. Right? Since 2009, she has remained in power. And as soon as she came to power, she has done a great favor to India. Because see, Sheikh Hasina is always grateful to India. She knows the contribution of India in the liberation of Bangladesh. She knows how close India was to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, her father. She's the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. When Pakistan was trying to assassinate Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, India was the one protecting him and his family. Fortunately, when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated along with his family members, Sheikh Hasina was not there in Bangladesh. She was in Europe with her sister. So after having lost her entire family, she largely grew up in India under Indian protection. India's RAW would continue to protect Mujibur Rahman's family. That is the close links we had. Indian leaders like Pranab Mukherjee, Indira Gandhi, and many others, right? They all had very, very close personal ties with Mujibur Rahman's family. So Sheikh Hasina has been like a daughter to India. So once she came to power, right, with a strong government, immediately she collaborated with then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, the then UPA government. Together, India Bangladesh launched joint operations. We started sharing intelligence. Our agencies started working with Bangladeshi agencies. Border security was improved by Bangladesh. Infiltration was kept under check. And she crushed the terrorists hiding in her country. The terror camps were destroyed. The funding networks were destroyed. Right? And all these terrorist leaders who were hiding, most of them, some were killed, many of them were arrested and extradited to India. Isaac and Moiva, this is how they met their end. Their struggle had to come to an end. With Bangladesh cooperating with India, Isaac Moiva faction had no choice. They had no chance. So this brought down NSC and IM. We successfully defeated NSC and IM thanks to the help we got from Bangladesh. And from here onwards, we began the historic Naga peace process. As soon as NSC and IM surrendered, right, the IM leaders were brought to India. So India offered one last chance, a last peace deal. And the peace process has begun, not just with NSC and IM, but with various other political Naga groups, Naga political groups. So Government of India, Government of Nagaland, they have been negotiating with NSC and IM and the political representatives of Nagas to work out a peace accord. Is that clear? In 2015, the Modi government signed a historic framework agreement to begin the peace process, to start the negotiations. In fact, Prime Minister Modi was present with leaders of NSC and IM when the framework agreement was signed. This is seen as a historic deal because we are on the verge of ending our oldest insurgency. We are almost in the last stage of bringing the oldest insurgency of India to a complete end. So since 2015, the talks have begun, the talks have been going on. Government of India and along with Government of Nagaland, we are negotiating with NSC and IM, which today has surrendered, along with other Naga political groups to find a permanent political solution to the conflict. Is that clear? Now, I'm sure many of you will have the same question. What happened to NSC and Kaplang and the other factions, the other smaller factions that were broken? This outfit, which is based out of Myanmar, it has rejected the peace process. It has rejected the peace process. It has refused to surrender. Is that clear? Why? It's pretty obvious why. Because it is China which is backing Kaplang faction in Myanmar. China doesn't want the movement to end. Kaplang faction doesn't want to give up its war. So it remains in a state of war with India. It is not part of the peace process. It has not joined the peace process. In fact, when the framework agreement was signed in 2015 to start the peace process, it angered the Kaplang faction so much that they carried out a major attack against India. The Kaplang faction retaliated against the framework agreement. to show its anger and displeasure with ISAF Muiwa faction and India, to show its opposition to the peace process which has started, the Kaplang faction staged one of the biggest terror attacks in the region targeting the Indian army. This was a huge loss for India in 2015. It happened just a few weeks after the framework agreement was signed. If you guys have seen the movie Uri, based on the surgical strikes India carried out in Pakistan, starring Vicky Kaushal, right? The movie opens with a scene. If you guys remember the opening scene, it opens with a scene in Manipur. You can see an army convoy passing through dense jungles in the Ukrul Chandel sector, which is right next to the border with Myanmar. All right, that scene which is depicted is a real incident, and that is exactly the incident I'm talking about. An Indian army convoy was passing near the Myanmar border in the Ukrul Chandel sector in Manipur. This convoy was blown apart by NSC and Kaplang. The Kaplang faction carried out this brutal terror attack, killing several Indian army soldiers. This was the biggest loss suffered by Indian army during peacetime in such kind of an attack in the northeast. So this really angered the government. It angered the Indian army. So following this brutal attack, the Indian army sought revenge. It sought to target the Kaplang faction. The Indian army carried out a surgical strike deep inside Myanmar, which eventually turned into a diplomatic dispute. Indian Special Forces, the para commandos, the para SF, they were infiltrated into Myanmar and they hit the terror camps of Kaplang faction and other insurgent groups, killing several insurgents, and they came back safely. See, India and Myanmar have a history of cooperation. Myanmar's military is very close to India. We have very good strategic security ties with them. In the past as well, our special forces have conducted cross-border operations. We have operated in Myanmar as well, at least for a few kilometers from the boundary. Myanmar has permitted them. It has allowed them to happen because that is the close ties we have. But the deal between India and Myanmar is that these operations will be covert operations, meaning it's classified. It will remain a secret for decades. Nobody will speak about it. Right? Those who are involved, they will take this to their death, to their grave. But this time, some of the government leaders, right, the irresponsible government leaders who are aware of the operation, they went public with it. This was a political strategy. They went public with the operation. They spoke to the media very next day after the operation. They started claiming credit for the attack. Right? The strike carried out by the Indian army was meant as a retaliation against Kaplang faction for the terror attack it had carried out. But by claiming credit and by revealing the covert operation, the leaders compromised India's ties with Myanmar. Myanmar was very angry because tomorrow Myanmar will face questions. See, this is a tacit arrangement, a secret arrangement that will exist between governments and intelligence agencies. You need to respect that. Right? We have done this many times in the past as well. But these operations were kept classified. But now that the government revealed it and started claiming credit for the operation, Myanmar was furious. Because questions will come from the opposition, the media. They will question Myanmar. How did you allow Indian troops on your soil? How did you allow Indian operation on our soil? Right? So that creates many complications. It creates legal complications as well under international law. So this irresponsible behavior of government leaders put a strain on India-Myanmar relationship. Finally, India's then foreign secretary, the current foreign minister Jaishankar, and the national security advisor Ajit Doval, they had to personally visit Myanmar to apologize, to repair the damage that had been caused, to promise that this will not happen again and to restore the relationship. So this was one such incident related to Naga insurgency. So that attack that you see in the movie, in Uri, the opening scene where an Indian army convoy is attacked, that was the attack which Kaplang faction carried out. It was retaliation for the framework agreement, for signing the framework agreement with IM faction. Now, the last point. What is the status of the peace process? What is the current status of the peace process? So peace process started in 2015. So now it's been 8 years. So obviously, where do we stand? Have we finalized a peace agreement? Or is there some delay? Is there some hurdle? That is something you should understand. I think it's obvious. If in 8 years there is no final agreement, no deal, it means that there have been roadblocks. There have been challenges and hurdles in between. So let's understand this. Let's understand what happened. The framework agreement was between Government of India, Government of Nagaland, NSCN-IM, and various Naga political groups and student union. These were the parties to the framework agreement. These were the parties who were part of the peace process. Now, the Indian government appointed R.N. Ravi as the governor to Nagaland to act as the envoy of the government as well to negotiate with the Naga groups and NSCN-IM. Who is R.N. Ravi? R.N. Ravi is a career intelligence officer, a very senior intelligence officer from the IB. He has been the Special Director of Intelligence Bureau. He is an IPS officer. He has considerable experience in the Northeast. Throughout his career, he has dealt primarily with Northeast insurgency. He has led many covert operations of IB in the Northeast. So based on his expertise, he was brought in from his retirement. He was appointed as the envoy of the Government of India and made the governor of Nagaland as well to lead the talks and work out a peace agreement. But what happened was differences came up between R.N. Ravi and NSCN-IM. Major irresolvable differences. This led to clashes between them during talks. See, NSCN-IM, even though it has surrendered and ended its insurgent war, it still continues to act like an organized criminal syndicate. It still acts like a mafia on the ground, like a gang. The armed members who still possess weapons, they are still engaging in criminal activities on the ground. Is that clear? So R.N. Ravi took a firm stand that NSCN-IM cannot be talking to the Indian government, working out a peace agreement, and parallelly running a criminal syndicate and acting as a mafia. This is unacceptable to us. He went on to write a column in the Hindu newspaper. As the governor of Nagaland, he went public. He wrote a column in the newspaper calling NSCN-IM as a gunda gang, as a criminal gang. So this really angered the IM leaders, right? And not just that. NSCN-IM has some demands. Its demand is not just for constitutional autonomy, but it wants a separate flag. It wants a separate constitution as part of the constitutional autonomy. This is a demand that the Naga rebels have raised in the peace process. Now, obviously, the governor rejected the demands, right? Because, see, the Modi government has taken a political stand on Article 370 regarding Jammu and Kashmir. We studied this in the previous chapter. I'm sure you would have studied this in current affairs as well. For the Modi government, abolishing the special status of J&K was a political objective, a primary political objective. The opposition of Modi government against Article 370 was primarily that J&K has a separate constitution. It has a separate flag. The argument of the ruling BJP was that these special provisions given to J&K under 370 is creating a distinction between J&K and rest of India. They've argued that this weakens India's integrity. It questions India's sovereignty over J&K. That is why they said Article 370 should go. When they have taken this political stand over J&K, how can they agree to similar demands coming from NSE and IM? Right? Politically, it is impossible. If they agree, it will be political suicide. Tomorrow, everyone will question, how come you said this about J&K and now you're agreeing this with Nagas? So politically, it is not possible for the current government to meet the demand. And also, India has not agreed for separate constitution for any insurgent group. J&K was a very different case. Promise of a separate constitution was made to Raja Hari Singh, the legitimate ruler of J&K, who merged J&K with India. But we can't provide this for insurgents who are engaging in violence, who have carried out terrorism against India. So R.N. Ravi rejected these demands. There will be no separate flag. There will be no separate constitution. We'll only give you more autonomy, more constitutional autonomy. We'll give you more flexibility, more powers. You can enjoy more executive autonomy. You can enjoy more administrative autonomy. Will give you a lot of financial support. Right? You can raise some local taxes as well. You can look after your own administration. Even some judicial powers will be vested with the autonomous bodies. This is something we can provide within the ambit of the constitution. But we can't agree for a separate constitution, a separate flag. Right? Because there are two reasons here. One, we can't meet such demands of extremists. It's not reasonable. Second, politically, it's not possible for the current government, as it has opposed similar provisions for Jammu and Kashmir. So as a result, R.N. Ravi objected to this, ruled out any of these demands, and wrote this column in The Hindu calling NSE and IM a mafia, criminal mafia. So this angered NSE and IM, and they broke the peace process. They threatened to walk away, quit the peace process. So after all this controversy, the government of India transferred R.N. Ravi. Now see, R.N. Ravi has been a controversial figure of late in Indian politics. I'm sure you would have heard about him. Where was he sent? He was sent to Tamil Nadu. He has moved from governor of Nagaland to governor of Tamil Nadu. And here he has created another set of entire problems. He's been accused of misusing the office of governor, blocking the bills passed by the Legislative Assembly. The issue has reached the Supreme Court as well. Right? He's withholding assent to bills passed by an elected government. He has pushed many bills to the president's consideration, deliberately to delay the passage of the bill. So that's another controversy altogether, where the role of the governor, office of governor, has come under question again. But in Nagaland, this was the problem. Right? You can't blame R.N. Ravi entirely for this, because demands of NSE and IM was unreasonable. Separate constitution, separate flag is not possible. Right? It's not acceptable to India. But we are ready for more flexibility, more constitutional autonomy, more funds, more development. We will give you more administrative powers, executive powers. Right? But nothing more than that. So because of these differences, the peace talks, the peace process has stalled. It's hit like a dead end. Then pandemic also played a role. The pandemic caused a disruption, right? And the talks have not really gone forward after that. All right. I was really expecting that some progress will be there in 2023, because next is election year. Before 24 elections, I was really hopeful that Modi government will be able to convince the Naga groups and they will strike a deal, because this could be a big victory before the elections. Right? Ending India's oldest insurgency is indeed a huge credit. Right? But now it's unlikely. It's not going to happen. It's already December, end of the year. With 4 months left for the elections, I don't think a Naga peace deal will be worked out. So whatever will happen after that. So this will get delayed. That is why the topic will remain relevant for you. You will keep reading articles in newspapers throughout the next year related to Naga peace process. For 4 months, it will not go forward because of the elections which is coming up. But after that, after a new government comes in, right, whichever government it is, after that, the peace process might resume and we might see a peace agreement. But please remember, one faction is still not part of it, which is your NSCN Kaplang faction. It's not part of the Naga peace process. So this remains a threat. It remains in a state of war. Its insurgent war continues against India. It continues to receive support from China. It is based out of Myanmar. So that is why the Kaplang faction remains a security threat. Is that clear? Now, all these groups, they are notified as terrorist organizations by India. NSCN Kaplang, the main faction that was formed in 1980. The breakaway factions, Isaac Muiwa Kaplang, they are all listed as terrorist organizations under UAPA, under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Is that clear? So this brings my discussion on Nagaland to an end. It's a very important topic. It's in news currently as well. It's not just some old topic, right? So that is why the topic is very relevant, because this is our oldest insurgency compared to everything else, even compared to Naxalism, Pakistan sponsored terrorism. This is the oldest extremist movement in India because it began one day before our independence. All right. So I hope everything is clear. Let's take a short break. We'll come back and we will look at the next topic, insurgency in Assam. This is a more complicated topic. There are a lot of things to discuss under Assam. We'll do this one by one. So take a 15 minutes break, refresh yourselves. It's 7:36. Let's come back at 7:51. Or let's make it 7:55. It's already 7:37. So let's make it 7:55. We'll come back and we will resume the discussion. Hello everyone, welcome back to the session. So now that we have finished Naga insurgency, let's take up all your questions and doubts, and then I'll start with insurgency scene in Assam. Let's look at the first question. Anjali is asking, so recently which Northeast Indian insurgent group signed a peace accord which was in news? I didn't find the name, please give the name. The recent peace agreement that we signed is with UNLF, the United National Liberation Front, which is a Methi group based out of Manipur. It's related to Manipur's insurgency. We will discuss that later. We'll come to it. All right. So the group with which we signed the recent peace agreement just few days back is UNLF from Manipur. Next question. Let's see the next question. Sir, what is the difference between martial law and AFSPA? Sham is asking. See, martial law refers to military rule or military control in certain areas, especially during times of war, when we are fighting a war with an external enemy. In some of the border areas, martial law can be introduced. See, currently we are under civilian law, under the rule of the constitution, ruled by a civilian elected government. But during times of war, in some places, martial law can be implemented, where the military takes over some of the aspects, administrative aspects as well, to deal with the security situation. Whereas AFSPA is different. AFSPA provides few special powers to the security forces. We will discuss AFSPA. Let us complete Northeast insurgency. After we finish this topic, then I will discuss AFSPA separately. So there you will understand what kind of powers are given to the security forces under AFSPA. Kishan is asking, is it rational to consolidate those states who have very distinct features and didn't want to join? Even we knew that they won't be keeping quiet and destabilize the region and destabilize countries, and they will create a political vacuum which could be exploited by hostile countries and extremists. What would be an appropriate answer for this in personality test? Okay, Kishan is asking, was it appropriate for India to forcefully integrate some regions which never wanted to be a part of India? See, this is of course a complex issue. But however, if I buy your argument, what you're saying, if India had not created a strong union, right, if we had given independence to all these areas, then the very idea of India would not have existed. As I said, let's assume for a second, Naga areas were given independence and it had become a separate country. If that had been done in 1947, it would have set a very wrong example, because there were many other communities, many other regions, many princely states which also had similar demands. I told you, right? Many princely states, they didn't want to join India. They didn't want to lose their monarchy, their authority. Some of them wanted to join Pakistan. There were many other communities, ethnic groups, and some regions which also wanted to stay away from India. If you keep granting this to everyone, then where will India be formed? Right? Where will the Indian Union take shape? So that was the question. So there was no other choice. We had to build a strong union. We had to integrate all these areas to create a strong Indian Union. Yes, challenges will come up, but that is something we have to deal with it. Next, Afreen is asking, what is Kole Kitovi group? Kole Kitovi is a faction of NSCN. That's the name of the leaders. Kole and Kitovi, they broke away from these factions and started their own NSCN Kole Kitovi faction. Like this, there are many factions actually. I told you, right? Kaplang faction itself has split. In Myanmar, there are multiple Kaplang factions today. So every leader who has a different idea or who has a different motive will break the group and create a new faction. It's like political parties splitting and forming different organizations. Similarly, insurgent groups also break apart, forming these different factions. But however, if when it comes to NSCN, the major factions are Isaac Muiwa, the IM faction, and Kaplang, K faction. The others are very minor factions. You need not look into them. You need not study about them. Kishan is asking, was KLO active in Nagaland? No, KLO, Kamtapur Liberation Organization, primarily operated in Assam and parts of West Bengal. I'll discuss that as well. Please wait. KLO was not in Nagaland, it was in Assam and West Bengal. Uni is asking, why are they given additional executive powers even after being insurgents? Because that is how you satisfy their demands. That is how you resolve a conflict. This is called conflict resolution. In conflict resolution, there are many strategies that are followed by the government. One, of course, is the security approach to target the extremists with security operations because they're engaging in violence, engaging in terrorism. So you have to deal with this as a security problem. But apart from that, when there are genuine root causes, you need to address them. Like we are focusing on development in Naxal areas, right? We are open to talks with Naxals as well. Similarly, with insurgents, the government should be ready to talk. And that's what we have done all these years. And when you talk, when you negotiate, when you work out a peace accord, obviously you give some concessions. It's a compromise that you are striking. In return for them accepting sovereignty of India, right? In return for them ending their insurgent war and surrendering and laying down their weapons, we promise to provide autonomy. There's no problem in giving autonomy. We have given autonomy to several regions in the country. Under 6th schedule, there are 10 tribal districts that enjoy constitutional autonomy. There are other places like Gorkha land, Ladakh, which have been given legal statutory autonomy, right? So providing autonomy gives flexibility. It provides for local administration. It allows certain groups and communities which feel threatened to look after their own affairs without much of outside interference. It helps them to protect their land, their resources, their culture, and their identity. So giving autonomy even to insurgents is not a major threat or a challenge. That is how conflicts are resolved. That is how you work out a political solution through peaceful methods. Shreyash is asking, how can we get NSC and Kaplang on the negotiating table? See, to ensure NSC and Kaplang joins the negotiations, we have to break the group in Myanmar. Right now, the situation is not conducive. The last few years have been very unstable and turbulent in Myanmar. We need the help of Myanmar's military to crush NSC and Kaplang. We need to carry out security operations to weaken the group, and then they will have no other option but to surrender. Right now, Kaplang faction is not facing the pressure because it has support from China, and there is no pressure from either India or Myanmar because of the whole geopolitical situation. So if that changes, maybe yes, then we can weaken NSC and Kaplang and push NSC and Kaplang also to join the negotiations. Priyanka is asking, denying their independence demands by India, how different is it from China's denial of independence to Hong Kong? See, I would say this is a very wrong comparison. It's comparing apples and oranges, right? Never ever do this in the exam, right? Because India is a democratic country. China is an autocratic nation. China's authoritarianism in Hong Kong is entirely different. Whereas India's fight against the insurgent groups is entirely different. As I told you, before independence, maybe some of the groups had legitimate demands, like Nagas. But post independence, after we adopted a constitution, after we provided for equal rights for everyone, after we guaranteed equal treatment without any discrimination, there is no valid reason for these groups to take up insurgency. There were other routes through which they could have satisfied some of their demands, right? So insurgency is not the option in a democratic state like India. So you can't compare the insurgency in Northeast with the situation in Hong Kong, right? India is always open to talks. We have signed peace accords. We have provided autonomy. China would never do that. China will crush any kind of opposition. It will violate human rights. It will exercise its authoritarian rule. So China and Hong Kong and India and Northeast are entirely different situations. It's not a right comparison. Anupam is asking, when did Naga insurgents contact China? They started getting some support from China from 1960s itself, after the 1962 war. Surya is asking, sir, wouldn't it make more sense to wipe out some insurgent groups like NSC and Kaplan who are adamant on the peace accord? Why strike a peace deal with such groups? Again, see, if you have to wipe out an entire group, it means you have to wage a war, and war has consequences, right? Civilians will suffer. There could be human right violations. The conflict could escalate, and that is not the right approach in conflict resolution. In conflict resolution, you have to use force only to the extent that is needed. If you use disproportionate force like Israel does, if you try to wipe out an entire group, there will be several disastrous consequences. Indian governments, fortunately, are aware of that. We've always used proportionate force, what is needed. Our goal is not to wipe out the group, not to kill everyone. What will that achieve? You can never deal with any violent movement just by using force. If that was the case, there would be no conflict at all, right? We know that excessive force leads to violations, human right violations, which could further escalate the conflict. So we just want to weaken the groups, cut off their finances, target them to an extent so that they become weak and they'll have no other option but to surrender and negotiate with India. That is always a better way of managing a conflict and resolving a conflict. All right. So guys, these were the questions. Now let's move on with the next topic, insurgency in Assam. It's another big topic because in Assam, it's not just one insurgency. There have been multiple insurgencies in Assam. And for each insurgency, the issues are different. The root causes are different. So it is a complex topic. I'll try to make it simple. I'll try to break it down and we'll go one by one. First, we will study about the insurgency of ULFA. Have you heard about this group? Some of you might have. ULFA stands for United Liberation Front of Assam. United Liberation Front of Assam. It's an insurgent group formed by a few Assamese radicals, Assamese extremists. So now the question is, why was it formed? Why did some Assamese take up insurgency? What was the root cause here? If you examine this issue, you will see that the root cause that contributed to the rise of ULFA, the establishment of ULFA, is related to the large-scale illegal migration that happened from Bangladesh. Remember, yesterday I was mentioning this, that the flow of refugees and then illegal migrants from East Pakistan and Bangladesh has contributed to socio-ethnic problems in Northeast India. This is the root cause for insurgency in Assam, led by ULFA. See, when India-Pakistan were divided, right, there were large-scale communal riots. And as you know, in Pakistan, minorities were targeted. So from East Pakistan as well, a lot of refugees came to India. There has been an influx of refugees from East Pakistan in 1947. Then from 1947 till 1970, throughout this period, we have been receiving refugees quite consistently from East Pakistan. Is that clear? Especially the Bengali refugees. This includes Bengali Hindus, Bengali Muslims, and few other minorities as well. So please understand the difference between refugees and illegal migrants. Both are different. Refugees are those who are fleeing a country to save their lives. If they stay back, they'll be killed either by the government or by the extremist forces. So refugees are running away from the country to save themselves. They're asking asylum in another country. They're asking protection in another country. So protecting refugees is a humanitarian obligation. It's an obligation under international law as well. But illegal migrants are different. Illegal migrants are coming to our country illegally to get a better life, to get a better job, to improve their standard of living. Indians also go as illegal migrants to several countries. Especially off late, Indian illegal migration has increased exponentially to US, European countries, etc. Because of the so-called American dream, the Western dream. Thousands and thousands of Indians, right? They're taking a big risk with their life. They're spending all their life savings to leave India and to illegally enter a foreign country where they're not legally allowed. Because to legally enter a country, you need a visa. To get a visa, you need to meet certain eligibility criteria. You should have a certain degree of education. You should have a stable job with a minimum income. Only then a country will give you a visa. Right? I'm sure all of you are aware of this. Many of you would have tried, or at least you're still trying to study in other countries. So not everyone gets a visa, right? So those who don't have the qualifications, they will try to enter other countries, developed countries, illegally. They'll try to sneak in, right? They'll try to sneak in and they try to find a better life. They try to get a job, improve their standard of life, etc. Those are illegal migrants. There is no threat to their life. They just want to improve their living standards. They just want a better job. Now, this cannot be allowed. Illegal migrants can become a burden, right? Refugees themselves can become a burden beyond a point, right? If there is a small inflow of refugees, it is fine. On humanitarian obligations, we can accept them. But if refugee flow is very high, that itself becomes a burden on any country. It becomes an economic burden, social burden. And illegal migration is completely unacceptable. So from Bangladesh, from East Pakistan, we have received a lot of illegal migrants, apart from the refugees. From 1947 till 1970, Pakistan kept committing atrocities against minorities. Bengali minorities were discriminated and targeted. Several other minorities like Chakmas, who are Buddhists, Hajongs, who are Hindus, they were all targeted in Bangladesh. That is in East Pakistan, I'm talking about. So all such minorities, Bengali minorities, few minority Hindus, Buddhists, etc., they all fled East Pakistan throughout this period from 47 to 70, came to India as refugees. We took them in, right? Many were settled in West Bengal, in Assam, in Tripura, etc. And especially in 1971, when Pakistan launched Operation Searchlight, it launched a deadly operation, a military operation called Operation Searchlight on 24th, 25th March 1971. On the night of 24th, 25th March 1971, Pakistani army launched this deadly operation to crush the Bengali liberation movement. The Bengalis had rebelled. They were fighting for independence, right? They realized they had no future with Pakistan. So to crush the Bengali liberation movement, Pakistani army launched this brutal operation called Operation Searchlight. So following the start of Operation Searchlight, a genocide was committed. Pakistani army committed a genocide targeting millions of Bengalis. Bengalis were slaughtered, right? Entire colonies were burnt. Women and children were also not spared. It was one of the most horrific events of South Asia. So following this genocide that Pakistan committed in East Pakistan, India received anywhere between 10 to 12 million refugees. At least 10 million Bengali refugees entered India because they had no other choice. They had to run away to save themselves. Also, it was a duty on India's part, a moral duty to protect them, because we are connected to Bengalis. Bengalis in West Bengal, Assam, they had families on the other side of the border who had been divided by the partition. So protecting them, accepting them was a duty of India. That's what the Indira Gandhi government did. We took the refugees in and fought the war to liberate Bangladesh. We directly aided the liberation movement as well, right? Many of these refugees went back, many of them stayed back as well. But flow of refugees was not the primary problem. We received some refugees, yes, in 1947 till 1970 and in 1971 as well. So from East Pakistan, we have received a significant refugee flow, but this is something we could have dealt with. This is something we could have tackled. Right? We've taken refugees from many other places, from Tibet, from Sri Lanka, from Afghanistan. We have a history of acting on humanitarian grounds, and that boosts the image of India. Right? But the problem began post 1971. After Bangladesh was born, large-scale illegal migration began from the country to India. Is that clear? Because Bangladesh was still struggling economically. And before it could see stable governance, the first government was wiped out. Awami League was thrown out. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was killed. Bangladeshi army captured power and military rule was established. So as a result, Bangladeshi economy suffered. There were no opportunities, no jobs, no education. So a lot of Bangladeshis, they started entering India through the porous border. The India-Bangladesh border is a highly porous border. There are many gaps in the border. So there was a big flow of refugees, a big flow of illegal migrants. A big flow of illegal migrants into states like Assam, border states like Assam. They took the full impact of illegal migration. We don't have any exact, accurate data on this, but the estimates indicate that the flow has been quite high. From 1971, at least till 2010, there has been a large influx of illegal migrants for a good 30 to 40 years. It continues even today as well, but the scale has gone down. The scale has declined. The number of illegal migrants entering India from Bangladesh has declined because today Bangladesh is a developing economy. It's about to become a developing economy. Sheikh Hasina has done very well in managing the country, in providing basic welfare. In fact, on several indicators, Bangladesh performs better than India. On the HDI indicators, Bangladesh has a better performance than India. It's about to be designated as a developing nation. So there are plenty of opportunities in Bangladesh, and gradually illegal migration has reduced. I'm not saying it has ended, it has declined, it has gone down. There's a significant reduction today. Is that clear? But the illegal migration that happened from 1971 all the way till 1990s and early 2000, that is the problem. Now, the Assamese, who are the natives, they are the indigenous group in Assam, right? Historically, they have been the dominant group. Since the days of the Ahom kingdom, Assamese have been the dominant class. So obviously, they would feel threatened by such outsiders. It's not just Assamese, even many other ethnic groups and tribal groups in Northeast India, even they have felt threatened by illegal migrants from Bangladesh. What is the threat? They feel that outsiders might steal their land. They might steal their resources. They might weaken their cultural identity. These are genuine concerns that causes anxiety amongst the indigenous communities, the native communities. So when there is such a large flow of illegal migrants from another country, right, this will result in social and economic and ethnic problems. It increased the socio-ethnic tensions because of the changing demography. It leads to demographic changes. Is that clear? So this is something that the native people will always resist. Right? So from 1970s, there was a growing demand in Assam that illegal migration has to stop. The blame was on government of Assam, government of India, government of Bangladesh. So Assamese, they blamed these governments for failing to prevent illegal migration. So as the scale increased, the tensions also kept increasing. They feared that the demographic profile is already changing because Bengali Hindus, Bengali Muslims were coming in, settling down. Right? They saw this as an economic burden on their state. They felt their resources will be drained away. Their culture could be under threat because 20, 30 years later, there will be interfaith, intercommunity marriages. Right? In general, conservative elements, they don't encourage such marriages. So that weakens the culture as well, the language, the faith, the beliefs, etc. So driven by this sentiment, several Assamese, they started getting angry. They started holding a grudge, a resentment against illegal migrants. This was targeted at the governments for failing to prevent the crisis. All right, so this kept on happening throughout 1970s. But what really started the insurgency, started the violence, was the manipulation in elections. Let me explain this. It's a very important point. Some of the political parties and local politicians, these political elements, instead of addressing this problem, as usual, our parties, our politicians, you know how they are, right? They're just greedy about votes, about winning elections. They don't care about issues that really bother the people. Instead of solving this problem, instead of curbing illegal migration and calming the tensions and building harmony between communities, these political elements in Assam, they started registering illegal migrants as voters on the voters list by colluding with local officials. They manipulated the voters list itself. See, illegal migrants will have no proof of document, right? They'll have no passport, no voter ID, nothing. So they can't enjoy any benefits in the country. They'll have to struggle. So what these political elements did was that they got their names listed on the voters list by corruptly colluding with local officials, right? They started adding the names of illegal migrants in the voters list. So this is a quid pro quo arrangement, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Politicians will help them to get the names of the voters list. They will get a voter ID card. They'll get their voter IDs done, right? So this is a proof of document, a document proof, basically. Now, by using the voter ID card, the illegal migrant can get other benefits, can open a bank account, can get a passport done, essentially becoming an Indian citizen. In return, these illegal migrants will vote for that politician, for that party, right? They will win elections and migrants will get legitimacy by making these documents. So this nexus started forming in the late 70s and early 80s. This was a dangerous nexus because tomorrow, if politicians are winning elections based on the votes of illegal migrants, that is a big threat, a threat to the security of the nation, a threat to the democracy itself. Because politicians will be forced to work for illegal migrants, to favor them, not to favor the natives, right? As they are winning elections based on illegal migrant votes, as they are playing a key role, they become their vote bank. They will start favoring them, pleasing them, and they'll ignore the locals and the natives. This is what got the Assamese worried. The Assamese were really worried about these consequences. Of course, some of it was exaggerated. Some of it was exaggerated by the Assamese leaders as well. It wasn't as if the migrants would have completely taken over the state or something. But definitely the concerns were there. Some of it was genuine. So this triggered the Assamese middle class, the rural masses. They resented against all these developments, and it triggered one of the most violent agitations in the region called the Assam agitation. Assam agitation broke out in 1979 and it lasted for 6 years. It was started by various Assamese groups. Several Assamese groups led by the Students' Union and as well as the Assamese political outfits. They gave a call for a full protest, a full-blown protest against the government. And this agitation, as you can expect, immediately turned violent. There was a lot of violence during the Assam agitation. Rumors started spreading that elections were being manipulated, that illegal migrants now had become voters and they were casting votes, getting legal documents done, thus effectively becoming the citizens. Right? So as these allegations spread and as the violence and agitation also increased, Assam became highly unstable. So obviously the government started using security forces to crush the agitation. Government of India and Government of Assam, through the state police and central forces, they started targeting the protesters. They started targeting the agitation. So this further increased the violence. And in this struggle, some of the radical students, some of the radical elements amongst the Students' Union, they broke away from the struggle. They broke away from the agitation and established ULFA. It was established under the leadership of Arvind Rajkova. Arvind Rajkova was one of the top leaders. So he, along with many other radical extremists, right here, who had become radicalized by now, they broke away from the Students' Union, from the Assam agitation. They realized that agitation will not give results for them. They took up the extreme path, the wrong path. They decided to take up weapons against the Indian state. They declared an insurgent war against India. They declared an insurgent war against India, and that is how ULFA's insurgency began against the country. Understood? Now, before I continue talking about ULFA, let me tell you what happened with Assam agitation. The Assam agitation continued till 1985, and finally it was brought to an end by signing the Assam Accord. The Assam Accord of 1985 was signed. Is that clear? By then, ULFA had already been formed by 1979, as soon as the Assam agitation had started in 1978, and government forces crushed the movement, right, leading to a lot of human rights violations. These radical students, extremists, had already started ULFA. Their violent terror attacks against India had already started. Then the agitation also continued parallelly. The other political groups, the Students' Union, kept continuing the agitation. Finally, India negotiated with them, the government of Assam and government of India negotiated with the protesters, and we struck an accord called the Assam Accord of 1985. This is what brought the agitation to an end. Under Assam Accord, many promises were made. A promise was made to update NRC. I'm sure all of you would have heard about NRC, National Register of Citizens. See, Assam has this list called NRC. What is it? It's basically a register, a document containing the names of Indian citizens. Is that clear? National Register for Citizens. This was a list which was created in 1951 after the partition of India and Pakistan. It was done to identify Indian citizens, to distinguish them from foreigners, essentially the refugees who had come into Assam in 1947. All right, NRC is not there in other parts of the country. It's only for Assam. As Assam had received a large flow of refugees during partition, to distinguish Indian citizens from foreigner refugees, a list was created called National Register for citizens. So it was updated only once in 1951. After that, it had not been updated. But as you know, after 1951, more refugees have come in till 1971. And after 1971, illegal migrants had come in. So now the demand of Assam agitators, the leaders of Assam agitation, was that you have to update NRC again. This was a key demand of the agitators in 1985 when the Assam Accord was signed. India promised to update NRC. India committed that we will update NRC. Because this list will help you identify who are Indian citizens, who are foreigners. So you can identify the refugees and also the illegal migrants who have come in. That is the purpose of this document, right? But however, such an exercise, a NRC exercise to determine citizenship, is extremely problematic and controversial. Let me explain why. See, in a country like India and in a region like South Asia, where we all look the same, how will you tell apart a genuine Indian from a foreigner? An Indian and a Pakistani look pretty much the same. An Indian and a Bangladeshi, they look pretty much the same. Right? Ethnically, racially, physically, we are not very different. It's not like we can tell apart by just by physical appearance. Right? And also, this is not about physical appearance. This is about documentation. The only way you can check citizenship, verify the status of citizenship, is through documentation. Now, the problem with any such exercise is that it will lead to several mistakes. If on the basis of documents, if you're verifying if someone is a citizen or not, right, that is always a risky exercise. What if someone doesn't have the documents? Or what if someone has got fake documents done? So it will end up becoming a faulty exercise. And when you're doing this at the level of a state, imagine how many people could be wrongly excluded from the list. Genuine Indian citizens who may not be able to give the required documents might get left out from the list. And the worst part is that illegal migrants can enter the list just by giving documents. They might have got original documents done. As we saw, right, they could have got original documents done. It's very much possible on the ground. So lakhs of illegal migrants can become citizens. Lakhs of our citizens might get excluded and be declared as foreigners. It's a highly problematic exercise. This is how genocides happen. This is how civil wars begin. We have many experiences around the world. Wherever citizenship was challenged and verified through such exercises, many people would get left out, many would get wrongly included, triggering conflicts, tensions between communities. It will always lead to stereotyping that only this religion is contributing to illegal migration, only this ethnic group is contributing to illegal migration. This will lead the local people and the radicals and extremists to target each other, disturbing harmony, leading to violence, which could escalate into a humanitarian crisis. We have seen this happening in our own neighboring countries. Take Myanmar, for example. This is exactly what Myanmar did with Rohingyas. Rohingyas' citizenship was taken away through one such exercise. So Rohingyas were declared as stateless by Myanmar's military. Since then, Rohingyas have been suffering. They have been subjected to targeted violence by radical Buddhists and by Myanmar's army. The same thing happened in Sri Lanka. The first Sri Lankan government in 1948 came out with a citizenship law and snatched the citizenship of Indian Tamils and forced them to go back to India. And then you all know what happened, right? The ethnic conflict between the Sinhalese and the Tamils. The same happened in Bhutan as well. There was one minor crisis in Bhutan where Nepali Lotsamphas were targeted by the Bhutanese. So every such situation leads to a humanitarian crisis. We have seen that. So Indian governments were aware that NRC exercise is going to be risky, right? What is done is done. There's nothing you can do about it. Refugees have come, illegal migrants have come. Some of them might have gotten citizenship as well. Unfortunately, there's nothing much you can do about it. Ideally, it should have been left there, and we should think about the future. Think about preventing illegal migration in the future, in the coming days. because it will divide the society, harm the harmony, the stability. It could become disastrous after that. So governments were mindful of this. But since the pressure was there, under Assam Accord, promise was made to update NRC. They also committed to provide special privileges to Assamese. A promise was made that a committee will be set up to review the well-being of Assamese, and they will be given special privileges, meaning more reservation, more government benefits, etc. With these commitments, Assam agitation ended with the signing of the Assam Accord. But after Assam Accord was signed, NRC was not updated. Because as I told you, governments knew that NRC is even more problematic. It will lead to even more problems. So no government of India took up the initiative to conduct NRC as promised. Right? And trust me, it was the right thing to do. Irrespective of which party came to power, even at the state level in Assam, no one pushed for NRC initially because they knew this is going to be disastrous. This is going to turn dangerous. But finally, the Supreme Court intervened. Usually, the judiciary is accused of overstepping its jurisdiction. Sometimes it is true. There was a petition filed by Assamese groups at the Supreme Court asking why the promise of Assam Accord was not fulfilled. It's been 30 years and still there is no updation of NRC. They had approached Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court questioned the government, why haven't you conducted NRC? You made a promise in Assam Accord and now you haven't conducted this. This is where the mistake lied. Ideally, NRC promise shouldn't have been made. Right? After you agree to it, it becomes part of the accord. That is a mistake that was done. Now the Supreme Court said you made a commitment, you have to conduct NRC. You have to update NRC. The Supreme Court ordered updation of NRC under its direct supervision to prevent any wrongdoing, to prevent any wrong updations. Supreme Court said we will monitor the exercise. Governments simply have to carry out the exercise. Government of India, Government of Assam. They have to create the infrastructure, conduct the exercise, and we will monitor. We will ensure nothing wrong will happen. So based on this, NRC updation was done. From 2014 to 2018, NRC exercise began in Assam. If there are any Assamese students here, you will know about it because all of you would have to take documents to NRC office with your family. Prove that you are an Indian citizen. It's a very painful exercise. Around 12 documents were identified by the NRC authorities, and you have to prove that you were in India before a deadline. And not just you have to prove your family tree as well. You have to show your family tree that your family members were also here before this cutoff date. And what was the cutoff date? Can anyone guess? What was the cutoff date for NRC to be considered an Indian citizen in Assam? What is the cutoff date? January 1971? No. 1970? No. Pratik and Pooja have got the right answer. The cutoff date is 25th March 1971, the day Operation Searchlight began by Pakistani army. It was after that we received 10 million refugees into India. So we chose this date as the cutoff date. So who can prove that they were in India before this date? They are Indian citizens. Whoever came after this, they are foreigners. They'll be treated as illegal migrants. Now, can you see the problem here? How can you just set a date and determine that these are Indians and these are not Indians? Yes, illegal migration is a problem. Yes, it has happened on a large scale. It has led to challenges, but deal with it. Once happened, it's happened. You can not do anything about it right now. You can't try to separate people, identify people on that basis, asking them to prove their citizenship. Because if the wrong updation happens, if millions of people are left out and wrongly included, that becomes the worst crisis. Right? It is a very explosive situation, very dangerous for the country. But Supreme Court had ordered it, the governments had to go ahead. So NRC updation began based on this cutoff date. Even though it seems like a well thought out cutoff date, it is still a random date. Why not January 1971? Why not 1990? Why not 1960? What is the basis? Yes, after this, refugees increased. But how can you decide? How can one authority decide that this is the cutoff date? That is why many critics, right, they criticize NRC. They are against NRC. It's politically explosive. So finally, the exercise went on. People of Assam, everyone in Assam had to go to the NRC office, take those documents, prove that they were here before this date. Not just that individual, you have to take your family. You have to prove that your family was here. Your whole family tree has to be proven. Or else, you may not be listed here. Your names will not come on the NRC list. Only those names on the list are Indians. Rest are foreigners. That is how it works. Finally, in 2018, by 2017 itself, a draft list was published. Draft NRC. The first version of NRC was published. All right. Can you guess how many were excluded? Any idea? How many people might have been excluded in the draft list? Does anyone know? 10 lakh, 17 lakh, millions for sure. Yes, you're right. Millions for sure. Narendra and Fani have given the right answer. Very good. 4 million people, 40 lakh people got excluded. Is that clear? Following this, there were several media reports, investigations that were done by the media. Right? They found out genuine Indians had been left out from the list. There were Indian Army soldiers who had fought in 62 war, 65 war. Their families had been left out, treated as foreigners. They also found out illegal migrants. They've confessed to the media in their interviews that, yes, we came from Bangladesh illegally. We got illegal fake documents. Now we got listed on NRC. This is the nature of a government exercise. It will become faulty on the ground. See, on paper, everything looks great. Saying that we'll have a list of Indians and foreigners. Wow, the great idea to identify legal migrants. It's easy to discuss that. On paper, it sounds good. As a discussion, it sounds good. In actual implementation, will it work? There will be many mistakes committed. There could be corrupt nexus as well. Please understand, in Assam, there is a lot of communal polarization. Several organizations, political parties have promoted communal polarization. There is a stereotype which has been created. A stereotype that all illegal migrants are Bengali Muslims. This is a stereotype that has been built by certain groups and organizations. All right, and this is a lie, because it's not just Bengali Muslims. There are Bengali Hindus as well. There are Chakmas, Hajongs, many other communities have come. But this stereotype has been promoted that all illegal migrants are Bengali Muslims. Now, what's the problem with this? Tomorrow, if something wrong were to happen, right? If some radical group, let's say they want to highlight a certain issue, they want to politicize a certain issue, what if they target Muslim communities? They might target Indian Muslims and later brand them as Bangladeshi Muslims. And this has happened in Assam. In Assam, Indian Muslims have been targeted. Indian Muslim villages have been hit. Many have been killed. Villages have been burnt. And later they will be branded as Bangladeshi Muslims. Imagine if this were to happen on a larger scale. It will burn the state. It will burn the country. So 4 million people got excluded. So a revision was ordered. Supreme Court said something is wrong. Revise the list. Come up with a final list. So people were given another chance to appeal. These 4 million people who were excluded, they got one more chance. They could try to get documents to show that they were in India before the date. Then, based on this revision, final NRC was published by 2018. Any idea how many have been left in the final list? In the final list, how many have been left out? Very good. Munna, Fani, they have given the right answer. Very good. It is 19 lakhs, 1.9 million. The list was brought down by half, from 4 million to almost 2 million, around 1.9 million. This is the final NRC list. Now, the government doesn't know what to do with this, because government officials themselves have confessed that they have come across cases where Indians have been left out. Even now, illegal migrants have been included. So what do you do with this list? They're saying this is the final list. Now, let me tell you what is the next course of action. Ideally, what would be done? These 1.9 million people, they are being seen as foreigners according to NRC. Correct? Next, the logical steps, the legal steps. Let me tell you what happens if the government were to act on it. In Assam, there is a dedicated division in Assam police to deal with foreigners, to deal with illegal migrants. As the state has dealt with this problem, within Assam police, there is a separate unit to deal with foreigners. And in Assam, there are foreigner tribunals that have been constituted. Across Assam, there are many foreigner tribunals. All right? Their job is to determine who is a foreigner, who is an Indian. That is their job. Now, these people will have to appear in front of the foreigner tribunal. They have to appear in front of the tribunal for one final appeal, a final chance. These tribunals will decide based on their arguments, based on the evidence and the documents, whether that person is an Indian or a foreigner. Okay, again, seems like a fair process, seems to be like a fair judicial process. Let me tell you the problem. These tribunals are headed by people with questionable experience, meaning they are not judges. They don't have much experience. They don't have a legal background. Random appointments have been made into the tribunals. Now, what if those who head these tribunals are biased? What if they have that stereotype? Everything is based on their discretion, their orders. If they declare someone as a foreigner, this becomes final. Assam police will step in. They will have to detain them and take them to the detention centers which have come up in Assam. There are few detention centers which have been built to hold foreigners, to hold illegal migrants. So this unit of Assam police dealing with illegal migrants will be ordered by the tribunal to arrest, basically detain these foreigners who are declared by the tribunal and lodge them in the detention center. Now let's say out of 1.9 million, around 9 lakh people can still prove their citizenship, which leaves another 1 million people. Now, can we really hold 1 million people in detention centers? Can you do that? What will happen if you do that? Already our jails are overburdened. Our police forces are overburdened. They have no resources, no capabilities. Imagine lodging 10 lakh people. Most of them are innocent. Their only crime, let's assume all of them are illegal migrants. Their only crime was they came to country illegally. Okay, now you detain them. Fine. What next? After their detention, Foreign Ministry and Home Ministry will begin the process of deportation. They will have to be deported back to the country they came from, which is Bangladesh. Okay, even this can be done. Let's say all these steps are done, we will try to deport them. Now, just because India is deporting them, do you think Bangladesh will accept them? Right? Bangladesh has no guarantee that these are Bangladeshi citizens who came to India illegally. Bangladesh has questioned NRC process. It's against it, because this harms our diplomatic ties. We are blaming a friendly country for pushing illegal migrants into our country. That's what we are doing essentially. Right? It harms our diplomatic ties. Bangladesh is already angry, upset about NRC. It opposes NRC. And why will it take those who are deported back? On what basis? It will ask for proof. It will ask for evidence. Can we bring evidence in every case to show that he or she is a foreigner? He or she came from Bangladesh. What will happen to those where it can't be proven? So this is a crisis. It's an unimaginable complex issue. So that is why right now governments are silent on it. They have left the issue as it is. Supreme Court only ordered NRC to be conducted. We did that. Our government had to do it. Now that the list is ready, the list already has lot of errors. Trust me, lot of errors. This is based on credible reports and credible information. Many Indian citizens are left out. Many illegal migrants are included. Is that clear? So it's unlikely that the government will act on this because these are the next steps. The next step is one appeal at Foreigner Tribunal, detention, deportation. If any attempt is made to do this, this could become a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. As the stereotyping already exists, there could be radical organizations which might end up targeting Muslims and calling them as illegal migrants. Right? Indian Muslims could be targeted, or anyone who appears to be a Bangladeshi could be targeted, increasing violence in the region. So it's a disastrous outcome either ways. Right? So that is the situation here. Now, what do the people of Northeast India feel? Across Northeast India, let me tell you what is the sentiment. Not just in Assam, across Northeast India. They all oppose illegal migrants because they know that illegal migration is a burden. It harms their culture, their land, their resources. Be it Assamese, be it Nagas, be it Mizos, Metis, everybody opposes illegal migrants, which is understandable. But however, they are not targeting illegal migrants on religious lines. For them, the religion of the illegal migrants doesn't matter. Be it a Bengali Hindu, be it a Chakma Buddhist, or a Bengali Muslim. They are all outsiders. They are all a threat according to Northeastern groups. So that is why they support NRC. Because NRC is not distinguishing on the basis of religion. It's only creating a list of Indians, a list of foreigners. That is what the people of Northeast India want. That's what Assamese want. That's what Tripuris and other tribes and groups want. They want a list to identify foreigners, irrespective of their religion. Now, there is another complexity which has been added to this, which is the Citizenship Amendment Act, the CAA, the Controversial Citizenship Amendment Act, enacted by the Parliament recently. What does CAA state? The CAA states that Indian citizenship will be provided to those coming from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And this will be available only to Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, Sikhs, Parsis, Jains, etc. on the grounds that they have faced religious persecution in these countries. That is what CAA states. In these countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, radical Islamists have been targeting religious minorities. That is a fact. That is true. In Pakistan, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs have been targeted. Same with Afghanistan, same with Bangladesh as well. Right? In case of Pakistan, there is state support. Government is supporting it. In Afghanistan, Taliban is supporting it. In Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina government doesn't support it, but radicals are doing it. There is religious persecution, yes. So Citizenship Amendment Act is excluding only Muslims from these countries, because the assumption is that these are Muslim countries where other religious minorities are facing religious persecution, targeted persecution against them. So India is saying that we will give you citizenship. So non-Muslims from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Pakistan, if they have faced religious persecution, they will be given Indian citizenship. Right? Seems like a good law. Now let me tell you the problem here. Let me help you understand why the entire Northeast India opposes CAA. Across Northeast India, there is opposition to CAA. They have rejected it. Why? It is creating a distinction on religious lines. What if the 1.9 million identified through NRC, what if the government creates a route for the non-Muslims in this list to get citizenship through CAA? That is a concern. That is a fear. See, first of all, religion-based laws, religion-based policies goes against the tenets of the Indian Constitution. Right? The constitutional validity of the law itself has been challenged in the Supreme Court. So that's for the Supreme Court to decide. The concern of the people, the concern of the critics of CAA is that what if a route is created for those left out in NRC list, right? What if non-Muslims can get citizenship through this route by claiming religious persecution, which leaves behind only Muslims as foreigners? In Northeast India, what did I tell you? They oppose every outsider. They oppose every outsider who's coming in to their region, irrespective of what is their religion. They don't care about it. Now, CAA, if it creates a distinction like this, and with a combination of NRC and CAA, if non-Muslims are given citizenship, that is still a threat to Northeast people. That is why they oppose CAA. They support NRC. They support NRC because there is no religion-based distinction. It's only listing Indians and foreigners, which is what they want. They want all outsiders to be out. But CAA potentially creates a route where non-Muslims can still become citizens by claiming persecution, leaving behind only the Muslims as foreigners. So this still affects the people of Northeast India because they oppose Bengali Hindus as well. They oppose Buddhists as well, who have come from Bangladesh. So that is the situation here. It's a very volatile situation. Right now, the government has taken a break, right? Because given the sensitivity, it doesn't want to proceed. CAA rules have not been notified. We don't know what will happen with NRC list, right? So we need to wait and watch. This is directly linked to the tensions in Assam and the insurgency scene in Assam. Got it? Now coming back to Assam's insurgency, ULFA's insurgency. ULFA established itself in 1979. It was born out of Assam agitation. The radical students who were part of the Assam agitation, who led the Students' Union, they broke away under leadership of Arvind Rajkova. These radical student extremists, they formed ULFA, and their goal was separatism. It was a separatist group. They wanted to break away from India. They blamed Indian government and Assamese government for the crisis. Right? They rejected the heavy-handed response of the government forces. So as a rebellion, they formed this insurgent movement saying that they will liberate Assam from India to form Assam as a separate country to protect the rights of Assamese. So this was the origin and the objective of ULFA. Now let me tell you the irony here. This group, which kept opposing Bengali illegal migrants, guess where it took shelter? These terrorists went to Bangladesh itself. They themselves went illegally to Bangladesh because they got support. From whom? From Pakistan and from Bangladesh. Look at their hypocrisy. That's why I never believe extremists. They work for their own self-interest. They don't care about the people. ULFA's fight is not for Assamese. This is just a radical, violent movement to serve their own political agendas. ULFA is deeply involved in organized crime. just like NSCN, especially in drug smuggling and drug trafficking. They have easily created networks with other groups and cartels, procuring drugs, weapons, running a mafia. They've carried out major attacks against India in Assam and across the region. And these terrorists who claim to fight against outsiders, against Bengali illegal migrants, they themselves went to Bangladesh and took shelter to hide from India. They got support from Pakistan. The ISI is linked with ULFA. Pakistan and Bangladesh, which were hostile, they pumped money and weapons into the hands of ULFA, gave them shelter to hide away from India, and from here, ULFA started targeting the country. So throughout 1980s, 1990s, ULFA carried out major attacks against India. In Guwahati and in many other places, it has targeted the illegal migrants as well. It would attack people and brand them as illegal migrants. So it became a notorious group and it remained a major threat for India until 2009. For 3 decades, for 30 plus years, ULFA was a major threat for India, mainly because it had a foreign base, foreign support. But thanks to the election of Sheikh Hasina, as the Sheikh Hasina government was formed, ULFA's back was broken by India and Bangladesh. The Manmohan Singh government immediately lapped onto the opportunity, built close ties with the Awami League government, and we launched joint operations targeting these insurgents. Bangladesh improved border security as well, plugging the gaps to check illegal migration. Even we improved our border security. We started sharing intelligence and even planning operations together to target these terrorist camps present in Bangladesh. So Sheikh Hasina's government demolished all the terror camps and all these terrorists were arrested and handed over to India. Arvind Rajkova was found in Bangladesh. He was handed over to Indian authorities and they are today lodged in Indian jails. So this is how ULFA was demolished by India and Bangladesh. Today, ULFA is no longer a threat. It has signed the suspension of operations agreement, basically ceasefire agreement, SOO. Before a peace process begins, it's mandatory to call for a ceasefire to end the operations. For that, an agreement is signed called suspension of operations agreement. So both parties will agree that will not carry out operations anymore. Government promises no security operations. The terrorists promise that will not continue our insurgency. We'll stop it. So ULFA is also listed as a terror group under UAPA. Even though it is technically an insurgent group like NSCN, we have labeled them as terrorist groups because of the threat they have posed to India. Because of the mindless violence they have carried out, the foreign support they have got, and the threat they have posed to India, we have labeled all these groups as terrorist organizations under UAPA. So by 2011, the group surrendered, signed a tripartite agreement with the central and state government. It has given up its arms and weapons, and a peace process was supposed to begin. But it hasn't gone forward. The peace process has not been initiated because the governments have felt there is no need. As ULFA has been wiped out and there is no local struggle going on, there's no need for a peace process. Because the situation here is different compared to Nagaland. The Naga insurgency, the Naga political demands are still very active. But in case of Assam, the youngsters, the current generation, they didn't bother about all these issues. These were unnecessarily polarized issues. So there is no strong support for any of these causes. So there is no need for a peace process. Once ULFA was decimated, there is no need for a peace process. But however, there is one faction of ULFA. There is one breakaway group called ULFA-I, ULFA Independent. It's headed by a terrorist known as Paresh Barua. He was an associate of Arvind Rajkova. It was these two guys who started ULFA initially in 1970s. So the main ULFA faction has been broken. They have surrendered, signed a ceasefire agreement. There is one faction which has broken away, which is ULFA-I, ULFA Independent, headed by Paresh Barua. This faction survives even today because it shifted base to Myanmar. It is operating near the Myanmar-China border, near the Yunnan province of China. And as you can guess, India has intelligence to believe that there is state support coming from China. Paresh Barua has contacts with Chinese intelligence. So this one faction of Ulfa remains active. It is still in a state of war. It's continuing its war against India. You might have read in newspapers about some minor attacks in Arunachal Pradesh. Some oil workers were kidnapped. Some Assamese businessmen were threatened. All these are acts carried out by Paresh Barua's faction, Ulfa Independent. India believes that China is trying to keep the movement alive by sponsoring Paresh Barua and his group, which is now located somewhere along Myanmar-China border. Is that clear? We have tracked Paresh Barua in Yunnan province of China. So that gives enough evidence to India to believe Chinese intelligence agencies are backing this faction. However, it's not a major threat. It does represent a concern, but it's not a major threat because the main faction has been defeated. And there is no need for a peace process. All these terrorists are in jail, many have been killed, and today Assam has become stable and peaceful. Is that clear? So this is what you should know about one part of Assam's insurgency. The insurgency related to illegal migration. The insurgency led by Ulfa. This is just one topic. However, there are other insurgencies seen in Assam as well. There have been other groups demanding separate statehood, demanding autonomy, demanding a separate country. So that is still left. That is something we need to cover. All right, now before we proceed, I would like to mention one related incident, which is important for the exam as well. See, I told you that there is a stereotype which has been promoted on communal lines. Many political organizations, insurgent groups, what they have done is they have labeled all Muslims here as illegal migrants because it serves their agenda. It serves their political violent agenda. There is one group called the Bodos. We will study Bodo insurgency. That is, in fact, one of the upcoming topics. There was a deadly Bodo outfit called NDFB, the National Democratic Front of Bodoland. This particular insurgent group, it's a Bodo insurgent outfit from Assam. It was targeting all outsiders, all illegal migrants. It has committed brutal atrocities in Assam and attacked Muslim villages. Many Muslim villages have been targeted. These are Indian Muslims actually. And then they are labeled as illegal Bangladeshi Muslims, as Bengali Muslims. So one such incident happened recently in 2012. There was widespread communal riots in a place called Kokrajhar. Kokrajhar is a Bodo region. So here this terrorist group called NDFB attacked Muslim villages, killed many of them, and branded them as Bangladeshi Muslims. This group, so-called, it fights against outsiders. It fights for Bodos to protect their culture, their rights by fighting outsiders. Now, why am I mentioning this here? I'm mentioning this here because you can understand how such stereotyping, such communal politics can lead to disastrous results. Investigations have clearly shown that these are Indian Muslims who are Indian citizens from decades. But such polarization, stereotyping has led to targeting of the community, where many of them are branded as Bangladeshi Muslims. Now, following these riots, the Kokrajhar riots, there was something else that happened. After these riots took place in July 2012, within a couple of days, a message started circulating through SMS and even through WhatsApp. This particular message went viral across many Indian cities. The message claimed that since Muslims have been targeted by Northeastern people, in other parts of the country, Muslims are looking to target Northeastern people. Such a message, such a divisive, controversial message went viral. Because see, after Kokrajhar riots, few Muslim organizations had organized protests in India. Because this was a human right violation. It was targeted communal violence against the community. So across India, there were protests by various Muslim groups and organizations, right? And The one protest in Mumbai at Azad Maidan had turned slightly violent. There were clashes between the police and the protesters at Azad Maidan. So at this point, tensions were high in the country, right? Especially between the Muslim community and the Northeastern community. So at that right moment, a fake message, this was an absolute fake message, a rumor, it went viral on WhatsApp and also through SMS, claiming that now Muslims in other parts of India will target Northeastern people because Northeastern people have attacked Muslims. There was no truth to it. There were no such plans. There was no such threat. This was a fake message. Now, I'm mentioning this because this sets the foundation for our upcoming chapter. We will be studying the role of social media, how it can be misused to create real world security problems. This was India's first experience with the misuse of social media, which created a real world security challenge. Following this message that went viral, Northeastern students and workers in cities across the country, they panicked because social media was new. Facebook had just become popular, WhatsApp had just become popular, right? 2010 to 2012, that's when social media platforms gained prominence. So whatever people read on social media, they believed it is true, right? Forget then, even now, even in 2023, we have people, educated people, believing what they read on social media is true. So as they received this message, several Northeastern students and workers who are spread out across India, they believe that the message is true. They actually believe that Muslim communities will start targeting them, attacking them. This fear triggered an exodus of Northeast Indians from other Indian cities. I don't know how many of you remember this, but in cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, even in Delhi, airports, railway stations were crowded. Bus stations were crowded by Northeastern students and workers. They packed everything, they left because they really feared that there's going to be an attack against them by reading that message. Fortunately, nothing happened. Right? There was an exodus of Northeastern Indians, but there was no violence. There was no real threat that existed on the ground. Later, our agencies traced this message to Pakistan. This viral fake message was traced to Pakistan. So possibly it could be a Pakistani operation to exploit the situation here in India and to create divisions in the country. So this was our first major experience we had with misuse of social media. That's why the next year when UPSC reformed the syllabus, this chapter was added under internal security. This was one event which motivated UPSC to add this chapter, the chapter on social media. All right. There was another global event as well called Arab Spring. We will study that later. Right. I mentioned that previously, but we will study that again as well. So Arab Spring was one global example where social media played a role in triggering rebellions and bringing down governments. That was in 2010, 2011. Immediately, we saw this incident in India where a fake message led to exodus of Northeast Indians. So government realized social media can be extremely dangerous if misused. Fake news is a very big threat. So following this realization, government started focusing on this, and UPSC also paid attention to it. So when the syllabus was updated in 2013, your new main syllabus was brought out, new subjects like internal security was added, a whole chapter was dedicated for the role of media and social media. Is that clear? I just wanted to set the stage for one of the upcoming chapters. So with this, I have completed one important insurgency in Assam, the Ulfa's insurgency, which is rooted on illegal migration from Bangladesh. Now let's look at a few other insurgencies. We will talk about the demand for statehood that has existed in Assam and how even this has led to some insurgent movements. Let's cover this, and after that we can end the session for today. We have 15 more minutes. This would be the last topic, and we can pick up the rest in the next class. See, Ulfa was a separatist group. Right? What did Ulfa want? It wanted full independence from India, just like NSCN. So that is a separatist organization. So this is one kind of insurgency. There have been other insurgencies in Assam which have only asked for statehood. What do you mean by statehood? They want a separate state within India, meaning they want to break away from Assam. Just like Telangana demanded to be bifurcated from Andhra Pradesh. Similarly, there have been few violent movements in Assam which has led to insurgency as well, where these groups were demanding a separate state within India. They didn't want full independence. These were statehood movements. They just wanted to break away from Assam and Assamese domination. There were few minority ethnic tribes which are concentrated in some parts of Assam, which have always felt that they are dominated by the Assamese, that the Assamese are acting like big brothers, right? So these minority ethnic tribes in some pockets of Assam, they have led insurgent movements as well. They have led violent insurgencies demanding for a separate state, to carve out a separate state from Assam so that the ethnic tribe can protect its rights. They can protect their basic rights. Now, which are these groups? The Bodos, the Karbis, Dimasas, and the Koch Rajbanshis. Please make a note of this. They've all demanded statehood. Some of the groups, the primary demand was a separate state. Now, India has tackled all these movements. I'll come to Bodo insurgency later. Okay, let me tell you something. We will discuss Bodo insurgency separately, because Bodo insurgency is also a big topic. It's a more complex topic, because within Bodo insurgency there have been different groups. You need to understand that they had different demands. Some were extremely violent terror groups like NDFB. They wanted independence. Some were happy with just statehood. That's the group I was referring to. One group only was asking for a separate state. There were other groups asking only autonomy within the Indian constitution. They didn't even want a separate state. They just wanted some autonomy. So within Bodo insurgency, there have been different groups asking for different demands, from independence to statehood to autonomy. So that's why we will cover this separately. All right, we'll take it up in the next class. It's a big topic. But the others, like Karbi Anglong, Dima Hasaus, and a section of Bodos, they were happy with statehood. They wanted statehood. So since a separate state could not be created, that would again weaken the integrity of the nation, the government convinced these groups to agree for autonomy, to agree for constitutional autonomy under the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Remember, we have already studied this provision, right? Under 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, a few tribal districts in Assam, in Meghalaya, in Mizoram, and in Tripura, these 4 northeastern states, only they enjoy the provisions of 6th schedule. Some of the tribal districts in these 4 states, they can be given constitutional autonomy. That is autonomy with constitutional status. So they will get flexibility and more powers with regard to governance, lawmaking, administration, even financial powers and judicial powers. These powers will be devolved to the autonomous district councils. The autonomous district councils, which will administer these autonomous areas. So some powers of the central and state government will be curbed. It's like special status to J&K. Not all the laws passed by parliament and assembly will apply here. All right, it has to be approved by the autonomous councils. The autonomous councils will have their own authority. They will have their own elections, local elections. Only the tribe members can contest in these elections. Right? No political parties are allowed. Other parties from the state and the country can't enter these politics. It's meant only for the tribal members. Only they can contest the local elections and get elected to the autonomous council, which acts as the government of the autonomous area. It will have its own lawmaking powers as well. It can pass laws. It can implement welfare schemes, protect the land, protect the culture of the tribe. So this is a solution that India has found out for statehood movements in Assam. The Bodo statehood movement was satisfied with the creation of Bodoland Territorial Council, the BTC, that administers the Bodo areas. The Karbi region, the Karbis community, they were satisfied with constitutional autonomy. Today you have Karbi Anglong Autonomous Council administering the Karbi district. The Dima Hasao, they are looking after their own welfare with this autonomy. Right? There's a separate autonomous district council for Dima Hasaos. So these are the three autonomous councils in Assam under the 6th schedule provisions. Now, this is the beauty of the Indian Constitution. It is flexible enough to match these demands, satisfy these demands. We quickly curbed the insurgencies without leading to further violence. Some of the tribes, they had started insurgent movements to fight for statehood, right? But we could curb the movement quickly because they were not separatist groups. They weren't relying on any foreign support. They weren't engaging in brutal, mindless violence like others. And they had no demand for independence. They didn't want separatism from India. They only wanted a separate state from Assam. So we satisfied their demands by using 6th schedule of the Constitution as a conflict resolution tool. So these autonomous councils have been set up. They are functioning today, providing autonomy to these tribal districts. Now, does anyone know how many autonomous councils we have under 6th schedule? What is the total? If you take all the 4 states, right, how many autonomous councils are there? I told you there are 3 in Assam. Do you know what is the total? How many are there in Meghalaya, Mizoram, Tripura? Some are saying 8, 9, 11, 10, 50, 15. Random numbers, is it? The correct answer is 10. Now, I want you guys to take this as a small homework, a small assignment. This is part of your polity. Actually, I should not be discussing this, but still, I'm trying to revise it. I'm sure you would have studied this in polity. Please read about the 10 autonomous councils. Identify which are those. Just the names. I've already given 3 in Assam. There are 3 in Meghalaya, few more in Mizoram, few in Tripura. Find out which are these autonomous areas. Which are these autonomous tribes? Which tribes have been given this autonomy? Please find that out. That's a small homework for you. Now, under the 6th schedule, let's see how it works and what problems are there. These autonomous district councils are set up, right? There are 10 that are functioning in these 4 states. I told you that they have their own local elections. It is only for tribal members of that tribe. Outsiders can't come and contest. Like someone who's not a Bodo can't contest Bodo elections. Someone who's not from Karbi Anglong can't contest those elections. It's meant for those people, right? They have a lot of autonomous powers with them. The council, which is the local government, the 3rd tier of the government, it has a lot of autonomous powers to provide welfare. Okay? This council operates through village level councils. In every tribal village in the district, there will be village level councils that are formed. So this is the administrative setup. There is no Panchayati Raj system, right? Panchayati Raj has been extended through PESA, through to the scheduled areas, to the fifth schedule. Only to fifth schedule areas, PESA Act has extended the Panchayati Raj system. That is in other states where scheduled areas are notified. But in six scheduled areas, Panchayati Raj system doesn't apply. As I told you, central laws and state laws will not automatically apply here. It has to be extended. It has to be approved by the autonomous councils. So here the administrative setup is slightly different. At the district level, there is an autonomous district council, which is a local government. And at every village, there is a village council, which is also elected. So this council has certain executive powers, administrative powers, law-making powers. It can impose some local taxes as well. Some judicial powers are also given to protect the tribal customs and beliefs. Because see, tribal communities, they have different practices when it comes to marriage, when it comes to inheritance of property, divorce, adoption, these personal issues, right? The family related civil matters, they are different in tribal communities. The customs are different. Even though India is largely patriarchal, where generally the male member is seen as the head of the household and usually property passes to the male members, right? In Northeast India, there are many tribes which are matrilineal or matriarchal. The woman is the head of the household. The woman gets the property, not the men. Women can they can marry multiple men as well. So there are many different tribal customs, which is integral to their culture. So to protect those practices, protect their customs, their beliefs, right? They need that autonomy, and that is what has been granted here. They can protect their land. Outsiders can't purchase this land. You can't go to Bodo area and purchase land. It's not allowed. You can't go to the Karbi area and purchase land. You're not allowed to do that. It's only for that particular tribe. So this is the guarantee given by the sixth schedule, that your land is protected. You can administer your own land, look after your own welfare, protect your culture, your customs. So these powers are given to you. Rest of it is under the state government and central government. Other subjects like, roads, let's say dealing with disasters, defense, communication, external affairs, all these matters are with union government and the state government respectively. So that is the kind of autonomy which has been provided. But however, there are some issues here as well. The elections are not held frequently. Elections are delayed due to some reason, right? They're not held on time. Especially the state government is to be blamed. States are, of course, not happy with it. Assam, the government of Assam, is not happy with the autonomy. So it keeps delaying the conduct of elections. It keeps creating some disruptions. So that is one issue that affects democratization. It affects decentralization. If no elections are happening, right? If the seats are not getting filled, if the elections are not on time, how will the autonomous council function effectively? Right? That is a concern. Then political parties, even though they are banned, state level, national level parties can't contest here. Like Congress, BJP and others, they can't put their candidates here for the local council elections. But what they have done, they have indirectly tied up with few tribal members. Basically, these parties have indirectly entered the region. See, of course, MLA, MP elections are different. In that, any party can contest, any candidate can contest. But for the autonomous council I'm talking about, for the autonomous council, seats are reserved for tribal members. That's why the council was created. But what these parties have done, the state and national parties, they have pushed their candidates within the tribal community. They've introduced their politics within the tribe. So some tribal candidates are indirectly backed by BJP. Some are indirectly backed by Congress. Some are indirectly backed by other local parties. So this has introduced state and national politics into the tribal equation. This affects the functioning of the council. Right? The council is supposed to look after local welfare. So this politicization of the council is affecting its functioning. And the worst part is that the state government has misused its financial power to control the autonomous councils. This is one flaw with sixth schedule. The flaw is that autonomous councils, they still have a financial dependency on the state government. There is a financial dependency they have. They rely on the state government for provision of funds. Without funds, how will the council function? So by using funds as a leverage, state government is controlling the autonomous councils. Right? So this is another flaw. So this has affected the functioning of these autonomous bodies, and it has affected the welfare of the region as well. So this remains a concern. Right? So now you're aware of the statehood movements, how it was resolved, about sixth schedule, the provisions, the positive aspects of sixth schedule, and the drawbacks present, the concerns present. So this is more than enough. It's a small topic. I think for today, this is more than enough. Let's stop here. In the next class, that's on Tuesday, on 26th December, because 25th is a holiday for Christmas. We'll meet again on Tuesday, and we will start with Bodo insurgency, the last topic in Assam. We'll finish this, and we'll quickly wrap up Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura. Those are smaller topics. Naga and Assam insurgency were bigger topics. Manipur, now it has become bigger because of recent developments. But Mizoram, Tripura are very small topics. So we'll close this and then proceed to the next module. So please let me know how the class went. I hope you guys understood everything. I'll just take one final look at the questions and we can close for today. Kiru Bagar is asking, is Citizenship Amendment Act challenged in court? Yes. Several petitions have been filed challenging the constitutional validity of CAA. Supreme Court is yet to take up those cases. It has held some initial hearings, but it is yet to pass a final verdict. Afreen is asking, sir, Assam has Assam Accord Amendment Act. So why illegal migration became an issue? Again, I explained this in detail. Assam Accord will not solve illegal migration issue. Please understand that. Assam Accord was needed because of illegal migration. So I think you got it the other way around. Vanshika is asking how media plays a role in insurgency of Assam. See, media always plays a role in any kind of extremist movement, right? We will discuss this in detail under the chapter, which is role of media and social media. We will cover that, don't worry. There could be some media platforms which could be reporting with an ideological bias, right? Some media platforms could be misused to spread fake news, to carry out propaganda, to favor one particular ideology, one extremist ideology. So we will study this in detail when we come to the next chapter, which is role of media and social media. Okay, last question. Vedashri is asking, when these groups ask for independence, do they know running a state is so difficult? How to create global image, how to manage diplomatic relations? Can we not make people of these states more aware so they don't fall under the trap of these radicals? You're absolutely right, Vedashri. Your point is absolutely valid. Running a state is not easy. Running a government is not so easy, right? So these insurgents who are fighting for separatism, can they really govern tomorrow? Even if hypothetically they were to gain independence, can they really administer the area, govern the area? No, they can't. Without resources, without experience, right? They can't rule or govern a region. That to a region devastated by conflict. How will they reconstruct the area? How will they improve education, create job opportunities, maintain diplomatic ties, as Vedashri has pointed out? It's not an easy task. So this is something we can leverage. When the government counters the propaganda of the extremists, we should convey this message to the people. To the local people, we should convey, ask your insurgent leaders, can they govern the region? See if they have the ability to govern. They will realize the truth, right? They'll realize that they have a better future with India, not by supporting these extremists. So as part of our campaign, our perception, media perception campaign, we should focus on the local constituents, the local people, and convey a message that insurgents cannot govern. Insurgents are fighting for their own political cause, their own economic causes, right? We need to expose their reality. That is part of our fight against insurgency. So that's a very good point. Okay. So guys, these are the questions. Let's end the session here today. I hope it's another fruitful session. I hope it was interesting, because I can understand some topics can be a little boring because not everyone can connect with Northeast insurgency. Same with Naxalism. Maybe you know more about Pakistan backed terrorism. Maybe that is more interesting for you. But these other topics might be slightly boring. But I'm trying to make it as interesting as possible with examples, with some anecdotes. So I hope you've liked it. I hope you have understood everything. It's important to maintain interest in the subject. That's when you will love the subject, you will read, and you'll easily understand. It doesn't feel like an effort, right? So that's it for today. Have a great weekend, a great Christmas. Happy Christmas to everyone. We'll catch up on 26th, right? So take care. Bye-bye.